Since there's nobody online, I'm going to do a attendance. I'm the chairman, Bob Sweet.
Carl Hummel, Vice Chair.
Susan Cahalan.
Leah Whiting,
Who's board?
Isabella Genova, the agent.
This time, I'd like to ask if there's anybody in the audience that would have anything for the good welfare of the Conservation Commission. Okay. Then we can start the public hearings. Logical restoration notice of intent, Providence Street culvert, DEP number 218-0869. And John Dudley.
Yeah, I just asked, do you prefer I sit down? How do you work at the table for the video? How do you prefer I try to get arranged?
However comfortable.
If you're talking to your easels, then
Yep.
you as well stay standing.
Okay, wonderful. For the record, my name is Christopher Houle. I'm a senior project manager with Ty & Bond. I'm a water resources engineer by training. Been in the industry for about 20 years. I'm joined here with my colleague, Lucas Cava, wetland scientist and environmental scientist with Ty & Bond. Did the wetland resources delineations for the project. And I want to introduce the project team. Here with us is Jonathan Dudley, the highway superintendent, and on Zoom we have the town administrator, Jeremy Still. I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge that this project has been significantly funded with town through town support, as well as support through the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And first, I just kind of want to give a little bit of history in the project. As I'm sure many of you know better than me, this project started as a result of some significant flooding on Providence Street back in December 2023 and January 2024. At that time, Jonathan reached out to Ty & Bond for assistance on the project to look at a slate of alternatives to consider for the project. Anything from meeting the stream crossing standards with a new bridge to a variety of other options. And so Ty & Bond has been working with the town right along since that time. We've ultimately landed at a proposed replacement of the structure. Right now, there's two 60-inch, about 36-inch tall corrugated metal pipe culverts. One is almost entirely crushed. So essentially, you have one 60-inch pipe at best. With this, proposed recommendations are to increase that to a 19-foot, three-sided concrete bridge. And that size determination was based off of field delineation of bankful measurements upstream and down, which is highlighted in our narrative. So again, the project will fully comply with the Massachusetts River and Stream Crossing Standards or general standards. As such, we filed this project as a ecological restoration notice of intent and seeking a restoration order of conditions. The project includes about 250 feet of stream bank restoration as well. A little bit on the upstream side of the culvert within the right of way, but we also have support from the two abutters downstream, in part to do stream bank restoration work that is required downstream of the project. Essentially, with the undersized culverts that are there now, the stream bank on river left, or the more northerly stream bank, has eroded significantly over time, and we touched on that during the site walk. So we have about 175 feet or so of replacement stream bank there with fabric encapsulated soils. We have new drainage that's being proposed in the right of way to address existing drainage issues. There's country drainage now, which essentially where the culvert is located is the low point of the roadway. So all the runoff is kind of funneling down to that area and causing some erosion on the banks. So we're installing Cape Cod berm and 3 new catch basins and 3 new drainage manholes to collect that runoff. And we also heard from one of the abutters during a site walk recently about some of the drainage issues they were experiencing as well. So we accommodated that prior to submitting the NOI. We have, inherent with these projects, this is a culvert replacement project. So we are working in the resources, I should say. We have BVW, inland bank and mean annual high water, bordering land subject to flooding and riverfront area at this site. Those impacts to resources are really just inherent to implement the project. So accessing the resource to put in the new structure, accessing the resource to build this new stream bank, et cetera. We have approximately 95 cubic yards of dredging that is proposed, primarily on the downstream end. Essentially, when the culverts failed back in 2023 and 2024, it washed a bunch of roadway material downstream, and that is present and visible within the stream channel. So we're proposing to remove that and restore the channel back to its more natural original condition. In terms of construction, sequencing and access and such, the town is intending on, or at least our plan and general timeline is to try to implement the project next summer. So that would include closing the roadway and redirecting traffic as outlined in the drawings to the west, potentially. That will continue to be coordinated. The detour routes will continue to be coordinated with the surrounding communities as well as entities here in town. But that will allow us to move fastest. It will allow us to do staging within the right of way, within the road, to kind of stay out of the resources for staging. We will have erosion control as indicated on the plans in areas that make sense to do so, downsloping areas. And let's see, lastly, I'll say we're in receipt of two sets of comments from the commission that we provided responses to as recently as about 5 o'clock this evening, 5:30 this evening. So happy to touch on those, but I will.
I meant to send them earlier, sorry.
That's okay. With that,
How long do you think it will take once construction starts?
it depends on a bit the contractor's sequencing and schedule, but we're hoping that the roadway can be closed for about 3 months. The whole project in duration might be 4 or 5 from start to finish, but hopefully the road closure will be primarily in that 3-month range during the summertime. I did want to say we received comment letter from Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife yesterday. I'm requesting 5 conditions, which were generally pretty standard, but one was a time year restriction that is not an issue with this proposed plan. It's no in-water work from January 1st to May 31st. So that is well within our anticipated construction time. So not an issue.
The initial DEP comments suggested there might be a need for a 404 permit. Has that been determined?
We anticipate there being a need for a self-verification. We are not in, we're not in exceedance of 5,000 square feet of impact. That would be the threshold, correct? Or
For 401.
yeah.
Yeah, but for 404, you should be permit under a self-verification, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So for the section 404, we were within the limits for a self-verification. So that's the plan for that.
Yep. We did also do a new requirement or newish requirement now under the GP is to do a survey for presence of bats. So Lucas did a bat survey there recently, and you could share those results, but yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully there were bats.
There were not. No, we surveyed the head walls and the interior of the culvert and didn't find any presence of bats or guano. Interestingly, we did find a parent weasel scat there, so that was just cool. But yeah,
We have those around here.
Could you expand on the decision to have a three-sided culvert and not concrete on the bottom and why that's going to help the road get the water there?
Yeah, definitely good question. So rewinding a bit back to like January, February or so of 2024, most of 2024, I'll say, is we did an alternatives analysis to look at what would be the best proposed replacements. We looked at John can weigh in here. I mean, there was a need to keep the road open and active. So we looked at options that were not meeting the street crossing standards, but at the end of the day, I think for grant funding purposes and regulatory considerations, felt that proposing a structure that is compliant with street crossing standards was the way to go. And then under that, we looked at three alternatives, three structure types. So we looked at the three-sided precast concrete structure, which we're proposing. We looked at a three-sided aluminum structure as well, or open bottom aluminum structure, which was another viable option. But the concrete is going to have a longer lifespan, essentially, surface life.
When we looked into the concrete structure as opposed to the aluminum one, the concrete's been around a lot longer and has been tested a lot longer, whereas the aluminum is a newer one. And when we talk to the manufacturers, they're like, well, we think it will be this long, but we don't really know because they haven't been around that long.
Now, with all those trucks going over it.
And that was another consideration, is that with the heavy trucks that run over that, with the aluminum, there was concern about the trucks damaging that over time, whereas with the concrete, it's a lot sturdier alternative.
Yep. And we also looked at a four-sided box culvert as well. So with that site, as I'm sure you all know, there's a lot of boulder, a lot of bedrock around. Using a four-sided structure, you need to really ensure that it's a flat base, and that when we did hit bedrock here at this site, as documented in the boring. So it's just not the best site for using a four-sided structure, because you would have to do a lot, or at least some ledge removal in order to do that, and that's expensive. It's time consuming, and to be honest, the three-sided structure is really one that's more in conformance now with the mass river and stream crossing standards and associated guidance. So that's, for those variety of reasons, we felt that the three-sided option was the way to go. But actually, the four-sided blocks ended up being more expensive too, with those additional considerations that I just laid out. So this was it wasn't the cheapest, of course. Aluminum was a little bit cheaper, but this option was kind of right in the middle, a good balance of cost with service life.
And the natural body, that's for wildlife, right?
Precisely, yeah. Best for terrestrial passage, best for fish passage, as well as cold water fishery resource. So we're actually being able to build a stream bed inside of the structure. It really, the whole premise of the stream crossing standards is that your the streams and U.S. Forest Service stream simulation guidance, which is kind of what we applied here, is that you build a river and you put a bridge or structure around it, and that's kind of what we did. So we're building a river inside of the abutments, and then just putting the top on top of it.
It'll be a lot better.
Yeah.
Especially if fish are trying to go through there with all that riprap.
Yeah.
In the stream bed, so.
Yeah, and we have benches inside of the structures. That's where the 19-foot comes from. Like, even though if you were to walk upstream or down, you'd look at the river and say, well, this is really only, it seems like it's only like 15 feet or so, when that was kind of our average. But you take 1.2 times your average baneful width. So that's how we landed at 19.
Chris, I believe Jeremy has a question.
Oh,
yeah, thank you. And thank you, Chris, for all this context. Jeremy Sultan, administrator. I just wanted to add the select board's point of view here. So we had extensive discussion over the course of at least 2 meetings on the merits of either three-sided aluminum, three-sided concrete, or four-sided concrete. And like John and Chris had both said, we thought the reconstruction of the stream bed, the longevity, the demonstrated use over the course of how long these things have been used before, we went with the three-sided box culvert. So we debated this extensively, and I appreciate the committee's conversations on this, and the select board's kind of in tune with our consultants and the highway surveyor or superintendent here about three-sided being the best option. It's not the cheapest, but we think it's the best economical investment and ecological investment as well.
Thank you, Jen.
And I'll say that the finance committee will be reviewing and probably making a recommendation at their next meeting a week from Monday night.
So what Carl's referring to is so the town, if I can talk
Yep.
dollars for a minute. So the town has previously committed through a annual town meeting article $300,000 to the design contract. We then received a $100,000 DOT grant and $116,000 DER, Division of Ecological Restoration grant. So that whatever those offset out of the 300, we'll place that back in the construction budget. And then the capital planning committee has recommended, and select board added to the agenda, or added to the warrant, I mean, $100,000 from free cash to support the construction efforts on the project. So that's 300 plus 100, 100, 116. So we've got kind of 616 there. We've previously spent 75,000 out of American Rescue Plan Act funds to do kind of emergency sort of, how do we think about three-sided versus four-sided versus aluminum sort of thing. And then my plan is to look for about $500,000 from the capital stabilization account. And then we will be pursuing a Mass DOT phase 2 grant for small bridge repair, which was previously $500,000, which we now think maybe, or which is now up to, and we hope to capture $1 million. So this is about a $200 or about a $2 million, not 200 million, $2 million project. And we will hopeful to secure, $1.5 million, give or take, in grant funding, and not have to use a debt exclusion to pay for the balance of it. But that's kind of TBD. So what town meeting or what finance committee will be considering on the 20th, and what town meeting will be considering on November 12th, is an additional $100,000 from free cash to offset the eventual borrowing for the construction phase of this project.
I got a follow-up. Could you clarify for the Conservation Commission what the $100,000 grant is and why that's important?
So there's a $100,000 grant from DOT. So that's for small bridge repair, and that's called phase 1. So that's on design phases. Chris could talk to this a little bit more eloquently than I can, but there are regulations that would exempt this from Chapter 91 review and permitting, which have not been promulgated yet. But if those are not promulgated in time, we need to go that route, and we will use the DOT funding to do that permitting. And then the $116,000 from DER we'll use both for the last phases of design. So our NTP, our notice to proceed, was September 12th. So design phases since then, and then some bidding services as well. So the $300,000 that was approved at town meeting in May of 2025, whatever is supplanted by these state funding sources will then shift over to the construction phase of this project and offset the amount that needs to be borrowed by the town.
Let me try asking again. Could you speak specifically about the Department of Ecological Restoration grant and what that would be providing, because that's relevant to the Concom?
Right now, the grant is styled as $111,000 in design services and $5,000 in bid services. So as DER styles it, it is kind of seed money to get these projects going, and to make sure that DER's voice is heard at the beginning part of the project. We'll likely be filing an amendment to move some of the design services into bid services. And then, it comports with, all of the DER grant requirements from there on out, including stream crossing standards. Chris, do you want former DER employee, do you want to talk a little bit more about the tie-in to their mission and what this project does?
Definitely. Thanks, Jeremy. Great summary. backing up just a little bit, when we first started, John and I and the town administrator at that time started talking about this project in 2023, 2024, it was evident that town wanted to try to the extent feasible seek grant funding to do this. So when we laid out, Time Bond laid out our scope of work for that initial alternatives analysis, we were already thinking ahead of making sure that the work that we did under that first phase was going to set them up for potential grant funding, like these sources that we talked about, specifically Mass DER and DOT. And, you know, we kept our fingers crossed, and now all of a sudden, you know, the town is in this, you know, great situation to have obtained those multiple sources. So what that allows us to do is, even though we had an existing scope of work, it allows us to sort of, the DER grant allows the town to sort of seek reimbursement for that work that was occurring under the existing scope. And then as Jeremy alluded to, there's a variety of other things that have come up that the Mass DOT funding will support. And Time Bond will actually be directly in contract with MassDOT for that. So sort of additional services that are needed to advance the project, little less, well, the DER grant expires June 30th. The Mass DOT grant has a longer timeline, so that adds more flexibility as well. So I guess in summary, the DER grant was, you know, really obtained by the sort of forward thinking of the town to you know, pursue this project in a way that was going to make it competitive.
Chris, I have a question. Going back to the river itself, Springbrook is a cold water fishery that leads into the Muddy Brook, which is also cold water fishery, correct?
I don't believe that Muddy Brook is a cold water. Do you recall?
It is.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But yeah.
So now
Yeah.
we're going to be putting a couple of culverts in, a couple of catch basins in, and we're going to be adding all that water into the river, which is going to be heated water from the road. Has anybody done a study on how much water is going to be added, whether it's going to raise the temperature of the river and therefore affect the status of cold water fishery?
Great question. Because of right now, the roadway is there is some drainage there that does outlet to the stream already. There's an outlet on the upstream side that takes, I think, the catch basins on the side of the street, is that like call it the westerly side of the street on the upstream side, and then there's some drainage structures on the off on the lawn area that outlets at the stream on the easterly side of Providence Street. So that runoff is going there in catch basins and pipes already. And then the runoff from the south side of the street, that's, and whatever isn't picked up in those drainage structures is country drainage. So that's going right into the river now. So there's really no change in terms of how much runoff is entering the river from existing to proposed conditions. In terms of impervious area, we are 100% working within the right of way. So we're not adding any new impervious surface or anything like that. So, but to your point, I mean, the larger point of, you know, is there a concern about cold water fisheries, water temperatures and cold water fisheries on the decline? Yeah, that's a real concern across the state, is that with climate change that and more rainfall, higher temps, is that we're losing cold water fisheries resources. And that is a concern at the state level. But thankfully for projects like this that really sort of help to improve those cold water fisheries rather than impact them, I think go a long way. So again, kudos to the town for having that forward thinking of improving resources, which is what we're setting out to do with this ecological nursery.
Wasn't there some kind of language in the DEP comments about redesigning one of the areas near the boulders in order to make it better habitat for the brook trout?
Good question. Yeah, I didn't realize those were DEP comments, so that was helpful context there. I have on my phone, if you don't mind, I'm just pulling up the Q&A. I was able to print those. I just want to read what I submitted here as well as the questions.
I'll open my Are you talking about my comment?
Yes, no.
That was in the proposal.
Yeah.
Part.
So let's read this kind of verbatim. It may be advisable to leave the boulders from the relic stone wall in place to prevent future upstream bed instability. Let's see. Stones may be placed within the stream bed to eliminate the perch condition for fish and aquatic species passage. This is something that could be done as part of the project. So there is a relic stone wall that is that spans the river just outside of the right of way. It's about 15 feet beyond the right of way on the, let me just get the directions kind of mixed up.
Point to that on the easel.
Yeah, I sure will. So yeah, the upstream side, so north is up here. That's why it's a little confusing, a little hard to explain, but the relic stone wall is right. It does show up in the existing conditions plan or grayscale on this plan. And that essentially, at one time acted like a dam. Portions of that stone wall are still there that span across the river, and it's created a small step. I do actually have some photos to show. I think we saw it a little bit when we were in the field together a few weeks ago. It creates a small step about 18 inches, 12, 18 inches. So unfortunately, it is outside of the right of way, and we have intentionally limited the project area to within the right of way, except for the area where there is downstream that we knew had to be done. So we don't have landowner consent to work on a property to the sort of west side of the road. Nature of my response.
Could be exploring.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, is it going to be a barrier for fish in wildlife? I mean, I was out there today with a little more flow, and you had this nice little cascading step pool through there. But right upstream of that, continues to be a steep section of stream, not much steeper than it is. There's another 3 or 4 dams upstream. There certainly are other barriers and other challenges to small fish, but we didn't study this or anything, but in my expert opinion, I don't think it's a significant enough barrier to require really adding to the project at this point. Is it possible that we're out there restoring the site, pulling coffer dams, that maybe some boulders could get moved around and get that addressed? That's possible, but again, not something that we're only including work within the right of way, with the exception of the landowner authorization.
Just a minor question. You're putting in new catch basins and it's coming together, and then 18-inch outfall.
Yes.
Is there a difference as to whether you run the outfall to the upstream side or downstream side? Does it matter? You use the shortest, the closest? What's the logic?
There is, and not to put John on the spot, but I'll give a little overview, and maybe John, you can share some of your feedback too from your knowledge and experience of the drainage issues there at the site. But so right now in the existing condition, I don't have that plan up, but there is a catch basin that is just near the driveway here at this property. And that is piped parallel to the road, and it outfalls on the west side of.
Right, that's that 12-inch steel pipe.
Exactly. Korean metal pipe. Yep. So that is there existing. We are proposing to put in a new pipe, bring that to a manhole, and then add 2 new catch basins at the structure, because your profile, this is the roadway profile. This is the existing low point of the road from both directions. Like all the runoff is coming down at this point. So we're picking up that drainage, that runoff, so it's not just spilling off on the shoulder and kind of eroding down the slope. We're putting it into catch basins. So we're adding 2 new catch basins just north of the proposed culvert. And all that will go into a manhole and then discharge in the same location that it currently is. What we learned at a site visit about a month ago with the landowner is that there was another It's not as much of a, it's essentially a driveway culvert that goes, like somebody's driveway that crosses under their driveway that up farther up down the road. But it's piped, again, parallel to the road in the road shoulder and outlets kind of on the opposite location on the downstream side.
Somebody
So-
buried a pipe that long.
It's very long pipe. I don't even know where the end of it was because it's very, very long, but very shallow. And so this homeowner here, had expressed interest in addressing some, of the drainage related issues, or I guess they thought that where the outfall was, it kind of caused stormwater to kind of flow onto their property. So in conversations with that landowner and with John, we decided to add a manhole to intercept that outfall and then bring it back into the roadway so it then connects into the rest of the system.
Is that the
So-
same owner who owns the pipe that's under the culvert?
I don't know who owns the pipe. It actually goes up past his owner's house and up in front of,
Okay, so
His
you're
neighbor.
improving on it.
Right.
Thanks for this.
Yes, sorry, it was a little hard to kind of explain and visualize, but right now that pipe is discharging to the downstream side. We could keep it there. That would be, we'd have to sort of make that work within the proposed fabric encapsulated soil lifts that we were doing. So, but we just simplified it and have us bringing all the drainage to one side of the road in the same network as
So
opposed to
that
having
is,
multiple.
that is the desire is to get it to one side, 'cause it sounds like you want it on the upstream and downstream side.
No, in its existing condition, it's going to the upstream end and downstream side. In the proposed condition, we're putting it all into one, slightly larger 18-inch pipe
And on the downward side.
on the upstream side. Yeah, sorry. It's not that I want it there or not. That's where the most space is, and that's kind of where we've already kind of like designed and accommodated it with the head wall and have riprap proposed there as well. There would be a little bit of a conflict with the proposed fabric encapsulated soda lifts, which would require us to add more riprap on the downstream side. So we're kind of trying to just simplify everything, and less outfalls is less maintenance, less time for the town. So trying to keep everything as, we are adding another manhole, but in theory, we're losing an outfall.
If you're putting one in, it's gonna drain on the downward side. Can't connect the upward to the downward.
Not sure I
You
understand.
can't, because there's gonna be a channel in the ground already. You can't make the drainage go to the downward side.
Yes, they're combining it into one.
Upward and downward drainage.
This is probably a
So
little.
they're going to meet in the middle, they both come into the middle.
one pipe is gonna discharge all of that system. So all the catch basins, that manhole that he's talking about, it's all going to an 18-inch pipe, and then it is all gonna discharge to one place.
But
There's no
side, right?
There's no up and down. It's either one side or the other.
Is it all upward though, John?
It's all going to the upstream side.
It's all going to the upstream outfall where there's an existing outfall. It's just we're making that bigger from 10 or 12 inches to
It's a
To
12.
eight.
No, I understand that, but it's- in my head, it seems like you're creating more usage to underneath that culvert at that point, as opposed to if it was discharging on the downward side, then we just follow the river.
Well, let's think about this, right? 19 feet wide. So 19
Yeah.
foot wide pipe, an 18-inch pipe is not gonna make that much of a difference.
Yeah, plus money that, it was 15 feet, because you're gonna have a bank on both sides.
That's so bad on the downstream side.
It is.
One,
Yeah.
much water rate as possible.
So we talked about alternatives with the landowner as well, and with John when we were out there, we talked about, because it is such a shallow pipe on this side of the road. We thought, okay, let's just take the pipe out, put in a swale, or keep most of the pipe there, have an outfall on a swale. It's really only like 12 inches or so below grade. It's very, very shallow. So we'll there's kind of already an existing swale there anyway. We'll dig in a new swale. That is a little bit more, a little cheaper to sort of make work with the existing grades and riprap that we're proposing, but that was not an option that folks wanted to proceed with. So the outcome was what we have here, is that it's all contained in one drainage system, easier to maintain. And it's visible. It's, yeah, I don't know. You have more thoughts, but.
Given that you found a surprise pipe on that side of the creek, have you looked at the other side to see if there's a surprise pipe coming down from the other direction?
We looked, yeah, I mean, we didn't.
Okay, so you did look, but you didn't find
Yeah,
it.
we have not found any.
Cool, okay.
Just, it's maybe not real important. I know it's a tight site, but is there any gonna be outfall protection? Or is this just going right onto the rocks and then, so there's sumps, maybe deep sumps in the catch basins? What's this catch some of the silt before it goes directly into?
Yep, so deep sump catch basins, are proposed for all the replacement ones that we have. And then the drainage outfall will discharge to a riprap. Essentially, it's gonna be built into the riprap. That's, at the base of the proposed head wall for the culvert. But there'll be a riprap, slope protection there.
So, but there's no way of catching any sediment. I mean, once that water gets into the pipe, it's.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the deep sump catch basins, which is what the town, currently maintains with their, this catch basin cleaning program, but yeah, I mean, we don't have like a storm scepter unit or anything proposed at this time.
Or any flat area, it just goes right onto the riprap and then slopes down. You run out.
It's going to penetrate the proposed head wall, and basket and wing wall. Or wing wall, I should say, for the culvert. So, just it's kind of the only way to do that. Yeah.
Their maintenance plan is just there. You're gonna have to maintain.
Yeah, so these catch basins will be added into our inventory of catch basins that will get cleaned on a regular basis. And as we do with other culverts, we're constantly checking them to make sure that debris is not getting hung up in them. If they do get, it does, we clean it up. I'd be surprised to see any debris getting caught up in a 19-foot box culvert. We'll be watching.
Yeah, and that is kind of part of the stream crossing standards too, is to put a structure in that's big enough so it can pass large debris. Well, pass everything. I'm sure there's always a bigger tree that can be stuck, right? Yeah, I haven't really touched on it, but it is outlined in our submission. This project has to go to Mass DOT for Chapter 85 review, and they have the hydraulic requirements. So we have to provide sufficient freeboard for the design storm. I think should look this up, but it's on the drawings. Our design storm for DOT requirements are the 25-year. So we're essentially providing 2 feet of freeboard above the 25-year storm event height.
And what happens in 100 years?
We're also past that. We also passed that as well. It's in the submission, so you can look at the table. I can pull that up, but we designed scour protection for the 100-year storm. I think we probably showed, there we go. So, passing around, but we have the 100-year event passing through the proposed structure. And 25-year, we have 2 feet of freeboard above that. So, I mean, 100-year, still not above the structure, but it's within the structure, but it's not 2 feet of freeboard. Which is okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm going to ask if there's any more questions from the board.
Susan, if you have more comments, do you have any with the response?
Well, no, I don't. Thank you very much.
For the responses, yeah, thank you.
I'm looking for a motion.
To issue a restoration order conditions for the Providence Road Springbrook Culvert DEP 218-0869.
Second, I get to do that now.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Any further comment?
Question on the motion. That includes the conditions spelled out by the department.
Oh, yeah. Reasonable, yes.
Motion been moved and seconded.
Needs a roll call.
At this point, I'd like to, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Good commission, I appreciate the time. Thank you for your support of the project.
Thanks for a well put together.
Thank you.
Next Myrtle's town meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night. This point is, formal minutes. Would you gentlemen like to start early?
Sure.
Starting early.
How's it?
Public meeting notice from the student authorized. Number 18-00 not to be determined.
Yeah.
What's
Pretty neat. Oh, with color, we like color. You get my email earlier with these. What's that? Ready? All right. Good evening, thank you. My name is Michael Dean, for the record, with DNL Design Group, here representing Bento Pinto or Benny Pinto from Mendon. We have filed a notice of intent for 2 Nipmunk Drive, also known as 106 Uxbridge Road. The parcel is located on the southeast side, you're looking straight up the page, so the southeast side of the intersection of Nipmunk Drive and Uxbridge Road is on the across the top of the page there. The parcel is located, as we all know, adjacent to Nipmunk Pond or Lake Nipmunk, I mean, shown there. Lake Nipmunk is shown in the lighter blue, the edge of the water. Blue. I did not go ahead and color in the edge of the wetland just because it's fairly close to that blue line, so that's what essentially sets up buffer zones on this property. It is a 1.8 acre parcel of land. So there is the resource areas down along this area, the edge of the water, and once again, BVW running right along there, that area, and then it blends back in and coincides in some areas with the water itself. So with that, that sets up the buffer zones. We have the 25-foot no disturb zone, the 50-foot no disturb zone shown in the blue, and then the 100-foot buffer zone shown there. Okay, so the project was in front of the commission towards the end of 2022, as we discussed this morning during the site walk.
received approval, and the construction on this parcel started in early 2023. Therefore, this plan shows some existing site features such as the existing house, which is shown here in the purple. The existing driveway shown in the gray color here. The existing septic system is shown in this area here. And there's some existing riprap shown along this area here, which is on the downhill side of the driveway. Through the original approval process, we were asked to stabilize that and add riprap along that slope, as the original plan did not have riprap, so we came back with a revised plan showing the riprap through the original process. So that was part of the original request and process where the riprap was built on the downhill.
So you want one slope? What?
Yes, that's what we did. Yeah. Today, as we discussed this morning, was 2-to-1. Yep. So let's see. So following the major portion of the construction, the major site work, driveway, the grades up in this area had to come down, which was solid ledge, as we all know. The applicant wanted to maintain the previously disturbed area down along this area, down along the lake. So they had done some brush hogging and mowing down in this area. This is one of the aspects that is associated with the current refiling or the current filing that's in front of the Conservation Commission tonight. Another, yeah.
What is the intent moving forward?
Well,
To
yeah.
continue maintenance in that area?
Yeah, I would like, once we get through this, and then I think we open it up and have discussions unless you want, Benny would like to, well, let's get through the process and then we can talk about that. That was one of the things that, we would like to discuss with the commission and get their feelings and then figure out, which way we.
Which way go?
Yeah. Yeah, and then another minor point is that the original order of conditions was never really valid. So that's one of the reasons for refiling as well. Since the applicant has been on site constructing the house lot, he has a better understanding of the land and what he envisions for the lot. With this new filing, there are a couple new proposals on the lot that were not included in the original filing. We have 2 proposed retaining walls shown here in yellow. And the proposal is to terrace that and add some landscaping. So that is shown as proposed conditions. Also, two 4-foot walls, terrace.
4-foot wall.
Yep. And another proposed addition is this area here, the proposed garage, 30 by 24-foot garage shown here in the yellow. So then also shown in the red on this plan, the red hatching, I should say, is all along here is the 890 square feet of wetland disturbance, which was disturbance to the vegetation only and no soil. Another hatched red area in this area is associated with that riprap slope that you had just mentioned, what the slope is actually. 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. The original was 1-to-1 where it dove down and stayed at the 25-foot no disturb zone. So that's a little further into the 25-foot no disturb zone, which was a previously disturbed 25-foot buffer zone at that point. The site has been worked and been, it wasn't virgin ground or virgin woodland. So that was a previously disturbed area. Also, in this red, Isabella asked that I superimpose the original wetland line, silt fence line that was in front of the commission in the end of 2022, and that's shown here. And then it coincides right here at the 25-foot no disturb zone, comes back around. Also adjacent to the existing stone wall shown in green is where the original proposed stone wall was, which is fairly close to the existing stone wall as it was built there, and a little further extension than what the red line shows in this direction. So we know the site has had a long history, starting with an amusement park and had rides and trains and things of that nature. I know nobody really wants to listen to all that because it was so long ago, but just reiterating that. Yeah, I got you. I understand. Yeah, and then it was recently all cleared and cut and with the previous owner that had to go through that process. So once again, it was, not that long ago, it was cleared,
Mike,
not permitted.
why don't we get through the presentation?
Yes, okay.
We can
Yep.
have
Yep.
the comments.
Yep. So clearing had taken place essentially up to the water's edge not too long ago. So this site certainly was disturbed over the years and decades. Benny would like to come up with a game plan for the wetland vegetation disturbance that's shown here, the 890 square feet, and then talking with Isabella in the site walk. Technically, I think that needs to be extended a few more feet, so the square footage technically will go back up. I just haven't had a chance to redo it, but it's, tens of square feet, so I'll adjust that. So we're here to figure out what the feeling is to just let the area grow back. And now that he knows where the edge of the resource area really is, he did not know, he thought the water's edge was the limit. As we walked it today, that the wetland flags were in, 8, 9, 10 feet from the water's edge in some areas, or a little bit more than that, but now that he knows where that is, he certainly will not be in there mowing it. And then the previously disturbed area, the 25-foot buffer area that's been, historically altered over time, Benny would like to keep as much as possible cleared. But he understands that we will need to work through with the commission. So with some dialogue, we're not looking for anything to be resolved tonight, but with some dialogue, we're in front of the commission, we can start shaping a plan that's going to work for everybody. So it's not violation after violation, and I don't think Benny wants to have violations, but I don't think any of us. We just want to figure it out to move forward, that we're all on the same page. And then also during the site walk today, a couple items came up. It was discussed that Benny would like to have a dock to access the water. That came up during the site work, which I was not aware of. So, we need to be adding that on and permit that properly. That we discovered some drainage issues down along the existing stone steps that are here. This is a pretty substantial site feature here. The stone steps coming down from up above. And there's some drainage down in this area here that we need to work on and figure out and come up with a game
There was
plan.
2 spots, wasn't there?
That drainage there, and then the second spot is over here where the drainage comes out of. There's some outlet pipes here. That's, I think, easier fix, just extending some of that heavier riprap right up to the outfall to make sure everything's stable. But here I really gotta take a look at it and try to figure out what the game plan will be. Maybe implement some riprap at the outlet, things of that nature. But we certainly don't want it to keep going on the way that you see it today. So with that, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of work in progress with the commission and with Isabella, and I'll turn that back over to the commission. Any questions, thoughts?
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
At this point, I think you have the questions for the board. Carl?
I'm not chair anymore, so you're going to hear me be a lot more partisan. It may sound like an attack, but I'm trying to give my position and then you have a chance to respond. I don't want you to feel there's any personal animosity here. So I'm going to frame my discussion in terms of, as you have on the document, there's a 25-foot no disturb, a 50-foot no build, and then a 100-foot wetland buffer. And the way the commission was usually treated that in the past is if you want to do something between 50 and 100 foot and you give us a good reason, we'll almost always say yes. If you want to do something in the 0 to 25, we're almost always going to say no, regardless of whether you have a good reason. And if you're between 50 and 100, we'll work with you and say, well, if it's absolutely necessary because of the shape of the site, and you do have a very tight site, we would probably do that. So having said my interpretation of what 25, 50, 100 means, when we met back in 2020, 2023, I don't want to say we had an order of conditions because as we've noted, the paperwork was delinquent. We screwed up because we were in between clerks and stuff. But at the time, you proposed to do almost nothing within 0 to 25. And what you were planning on doing in the 50 to 100 was a little bit of your driveway, which we said was a good idea so you could get up to the top of the house. And you proposed a 1-to-1 slope that very specifically would stay out of the 25-foot area. And I'm concerned that somebody decided to change that 1-to-1 plan to a 2-to-1. You didn't ask us for any clarification or permission. And as soon as you did that, you went inside the 25-foot no build. So I'm very concerned about that issue. Now, before I go all ballistic and saying you have to tear it out, one of the things I'd like people who have an engineering background to do is say, what's the quality of that 2-to-1 slope? Is it stable? Is it going to benefit the site? Is it something, or is it, looks like it's bad and we should have that pulled back to a 1-to-1? So I'd appreciate getting input from the other committee members as to whether we should continue to allow this 2-to-1 slope, which went over the 25-foot. So that's my first comment, focusing on that. And later on, we'll talk about your second thing that you want to do, which is the proposed driveway and garage. So I'd like to get feedback on the slope issue.
Does anybody on the commission have a comment or feedback?
I didn't mind the slope that's there with the stumps and that kind of nice moss. And so whether that was a 2.5 slope to 1, it's basically the area that you're calling for 2 walls that has no riprap. I'm comfortable with that slope. It just needs to be planted with this. Where I have more of a problem is where you've got the riprap at a 2-to-1 slope. That's where I'd be tempted to put in the walls so that
Put that back up.
you would have less impact.
Yeah, I don't control that.
To something on the screen, and Isabella just yanked it off the screen. Yeah, what I'm talking about is this area here that you have in the
Yes.
red hatches. And so I'm saying, Peter, if you could say, and Bob, when you saw this part of the slope here, does that look good? Is it something that we should allow there to stay there, or should we say, no, go back to a 1-to-1 slope?
I don't like riprap in the bottom. So by having a 1-to-1 riprap with a wall, you're having less riprap, and then the bottom part could be more naturalized. Yes, so it's almost like pulling out some of that riprap by putting in a wall, and then you have more natural on the 2-to-1 slope below the riprap. But that's, and then the other part is you have some riprap. The original silt fence line, because is that where you have more riprap on the?
We have a residence, Peter, that's where the riprap goes beyond. But from hysterical.
Right, and that, so my comments up to now were this.
They coincide.
And my question is this a riprap?
That's the existing riprap,
Existing riprap?
yes, which is outside the original, so, but yes, that's some stone, wasn't stone riprap.
Which is probably needed to make that slope, because it's kind of narrow. But my more concern is coming there, but that's a separate issue. So the real question is, what you want in here. He's proposing 2 4-foot walls and 1, 2, 3, 4 trees, I guess, and shrubs. The real question is, what's the ground cover? And is that still going to be a 2-to-1 slope between the walls or flat?
No, so we would add the 2 4-footers, so it should add 8 vertical feet overall, so the intent is to flatten that and add the landscaping, so it will not be as.
I can see any native shrubs compared to that.
Yeah, well, we would plant native shrubs and or if we have any input, or we could come up with a landscaping plan. I have not We have not spec'd out the plants at this point,
Like I have.
but yeah, sure.
One-to-one slope requires, engineered plan for it, doesn't it?
Not, I can come up
We
with,
just
I can come up with a
have
design.
112 inside.
What's that? I'm sorry?
112,
Much bigger,
That was a lot steeper.
much
Yeah.
bigger.
well, 1-to-1 is 1-to-1. Whether it's 300 feet high or 30 feet high.
Yeah.
I
I mean, but yeah, sometimes the one-to-one slope, you should follow a detail and we could come up with a design if we need to. But the one-to-one with the riprap, that's how we designed it originally. It was pretty tight, but we came down and like Kyle mentioned, it was to coincide with the 25-foot no disturb zone.
And I believe on 4 you're gonna need fences.
Over 4 feet, I believe.
It's 40 inches.
All right, I'll make them 3.5 then. No, for real, because I don't think Benny wants to see fences in front of
agree.
his. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why, like I said.
So I'll check that.
You might wanna look into that because, there is that fall protection that you need
Yeah.
to incorporate if you go.
Yeah.
Too high.
I think it's 4 feet, because you don't need a building permit.
Right, but that's.
If it's 4 feet and below.
That's how I understand it, but the answer is for sure, I can get the information, yeah, because we don't want fences. That's not Benny's intent, is to put a couple fences in front of his yard, I don't believe, right? And then the only thing I would say, and I know that it's the 0 to 25 and it did encroach. As he placed that was the 2-to-1, but I would just say that it is in a 25-foot no disturb zone that was previously disturbed is all I would say. So the impacts are really slightly different than if it was just totally, in my opinion, that it was, and I understand what you have to deal with. You have to deal with the bylaw and, that's all I have to say for that.
I'll try summarizing again. There
Yeah.
are it sounds like there are 3 options we can ask you to do. One of them is, it's okay the way it is. We'll glare at you and give you permission after the fact. The second one is to have you go back to a 1-to-1 slope. And I think, Peter, you were saying, do something and then put in a retaining wall for part of it. Have part of it being riprap and then having it end at a stone wall.
Well, I was talking about
Are you talking about the other section?
riprap in the northern section.
Okay, the other section, okay. So I guess there's just those 2 options, and I'm not educated enough to look at the riprap slope that is now encroaching in the hatch grade area. Is that stable? Is it going to be good for the future resource area of the site? Or do we ask him to yank it back in the original 1-to-1?
I guess my problem with riprap is eventually something's gonna grow up in there, right? You're not blowing out the leaves, there's gonna be dirt that grows in there. So what does it look like in 10, 20 years? Then eventually trees are gonna grow in there, I guess, and then that would be okay until the trees root and fall. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. what-
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was originally graded off and it was requested by this commission during that process was to add riprap. I understand that with the steep slopes. I personally think it's a little more stable with the riprap, and there's probably how many feet of riprap are there with the amount of rock that tens of feet got blasted down. So roughly, how many feet of riprap is there?
About 3 feet.
3 feet of riprap this size. And being out there today, I would say that it's fairly stable. Now, bringing it in and increasing the steepness from 2-to-1 to 1-to-1, in theory, would make it a little less unstable. But here again, if it's 1-to-1 and that's what we end up doing, then Benny needs to take care and build it at 1-to-1 and it can remain stable as well. So I don't want to present that you can't do a 1-to-1, but in theory, a 1-to-1 is less steep, less stable than a 2-to-1. However, if they're both built properly, then they're going to stay stable. Now, I understand that Benny, he lost that area. There was during the construction and the tens and tens of feet that he was hammering. I would say Benny lost a little control in that area. And I'm not even sure Benny knew that he did it. We just did the as-built, and that's one of the reasons why, this commission was asking me to get a filing in for so long, and then we finally did an accurate as-built of the site. We didn't have that until, a few weeks ago, so. And then that's what we discovered, and now we're here in front of the commission, but.
Was there any geotextile type fabric or anything beneath that 3 feet of river to prevent any silts or fines going to the lake on that side because it looks pretty shallow.
Yeah, 3 feet of riprap. I don't believe you lined it with geotextile, did you? Geotextile, did you put a fabric down before you put the 3 feet of riprap?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Select,
Yeah, he said, so yes, he says that they put that.
How far past the original silt fence is that disturbance?
It's, it comes out to 560 square feet,
Right.
and let me just scale it.
is it was original 1-to-1, and that's what, about 20 feet high? So I put it 20 feet out, and now it's 40 feet out?
Yeah, so in the worst case, it is about 9-10 feet in the worst case. And then it tapers down. For the majority of it is probably 6-7 feet. And then the ends kind of taper in.
So even the dirt itself is in the 25 foot, if there's only 3 feet of stone.
Yeah, it was probably shaped when he constructed the driveway, and that was kind of with the dirt. So that by default had some dirt and material, and then he probably, I would presume, started bringing the rock out down along the side. So there is some dirt under it.
I think I just wanted to focus that there's multiple parts that we're reviewing, so there is encroachment into the 25-foot no disturb, as Carl pointed out, with the riprap that wasn't permitted. In my opinion, that doesn't sound like too difficult of it, or not difficult, but I don't think Benny's here to say he needs that riprap slope necessarily. If we're looking at other things trying to be permitted, if it could be brought outside of the no disturb, it probably should be. So that's an encroachment. We're looking at encroachment that the 25-foot no disturb has been mowed. The original limit of work, which, you know, I wasn't here at the time that this was permitted previously, but when I look at something with a silt fence and a limit of work, that's what I'm understanding as the limit of lawn and approved disturbance. So I don't think that there maybe weren't discussions of the extent of where lawn was going to be. So, you know, the 25 no disturb is intended to not be disturbed. That's what the bylaw is for. This is a lake. It's not just BVW. And so that area, you know, if being restored in the 25-foot no disturbance, I think discussions about where lake access, if there is going to be lake access, should there be some sort of stepping stones or boardwalk that gets you through, that doesn't need to be continual maintenance. And the riprap being in the no disturb zone, that's not wildlife habitat. And so that's, you know, the no disturb. And then we're also looking at the 890 square feet of wetland disturbance, which is different than no disturb zone. And then separately, there are new requests within the no build. And I'll read the bylaw that no buildings or structures shall be permitted in the no build zone. So in my interpretation of the bylaw, that includes stone walls, which would be a structure. So the stone walls and the garage do not comply with the no build by being within the 50-foot no disturb. So I think alternatives should be discussed. Instead of a terraced landscape, why can't that be a slope that then encourages wildlife behavior? What shade trees can be put back to restore the area, and those kinds of things are what, you know, I think there are multiple parts. We're looking at wetland restoration, no disturb restoration, and then a request to permit new structures and a dock. Yeah.
Also, sand, beach, I'm thinking that, there's not gonna be the ability for sanding an area to make a beach for that area as well.
I mean, there are, you do have to consider that this site, when it was owned by the previous owner, it was subdivided after the bylaw. So we're looking at the Wetland Protection Act limits your ability to disturb, bank, and bordering vegetated wetland. So depending on what thresholds were permitted previously, there may not be opportunity for more permitting of alteration of resource area. I think talking about this area being disturbed previously in 2018, DEP's order for a new notice of intent that was submitted to this commission. This commission was in charge of restoration of this area through 2018. A COC was applied for and submitted in 2021, I believe. So the site was restored, there was vegetation regrowth, and then re-permitted or approved the construction of a house, but that, you know, this area was restored for a reason.
So the 890 square feet, is that after the original restoration?
That was disturbed again, yes.
Yes.
And so I think that needs to be separated out probably into an enforcement order. Depending on what the commission wants, if the 2018 filing is, you know, sufficient that the regrowth was enough restoration in that time, whether the commission thinks regrowth of the vegetation that's there in the 890 square feet is sufficient again, or if they want to see shrubs or plantings, which maybe need a wetland scientist. But I think that's something that can be ordered to be completed while we work through the rest of the information, or we can, you know, it seems we don't have a DEP file number anyway, so you do need to continue, but the wetland restoration aspect is something you could probably break off from the filing and discussions of other things. But again, do you, depending on where the dock is maybe going, is there going to be some sort of alteration that you then want to permit replication or something else for that area is something the applicant would need to come up with.
So in addition to the drawings that we have now, we're going to be looking for a dock location. We're going to be looking for a restorative plan for what was already disturbed. We're going to be looking to see what it takes to pull that bank back out of the 25-foot no disturb. And
Back.
the riprap banking out of the 25-foot no disturb, and what would be done in order to avoid putting terrace bank steps in 4-foot high walls.
I'll ask a philosophical question for the rest of the commission. The yellow areas on here is a request to do work between 25 and 50 feet. So it would be probably helpful for the applicant and their management team if they can get a feeling about how they feel about allowing them to do continued work on this site. So there's a balancing act between the wetlands bylaw and upholding the resource area constraints versus it being a very tight lot and the previous history of the site that we talked about. So I'm still up, I haven't decided, do we allow you to do the stuff in yellow or not? I'm waiting to hear more information, but.
Well, which yellow? There's yellow walls.
All of
them. Yellow garage.
Either of them, yeah. How people feel about that, that might be helpful for them to come, when they come back with the next plan.
There's just a lot wrong with the site that's gone on with the site. And now things are very complicated because of that. I feel like if we could just put a hold, figure this stuff out, then we will be in a much better position and hopefully things won't get more complicated. Because there's just a lot going on.
Susan, do you have any further thoughts?
Yeah, since that area where the one proposed garage has not been developed yet at all, I think everything should be I think we can go right there until we, again, you come forward with a plan.
Peter?
I'm not in favor of considering the garage and driveway. I am in favor, as I think you stated, if we could draw back some of that riprap out of the 25-foot slope. That leaves the question as to how to handle the rest of the slope that they were proposing with stone walls. I think our agent is suggesting maybe that could be done in a slope to make it more friendly to wildlife and
I think the garage is not achievable. And I think what again, it would be helpful for the applicant is what it would actually look like with that stone wall. Those two-tier stone walls. I mean, Peter, you had said they might be attractive, but they might not do the job. And I'd like to, perhaps if we can ask the applicant to submit something that shows what restoration would be like and whether it's, from an engineering standpoint, feasible that you're not gonna have wash silt going into the water all the time. But, I agree. I think this is an unfortunate series of events that occurred.
So it sounds like at this point, the board wants to, instead of going forward, we want to repair what was done in the past. Let's get the 25-foot no disturb under control. Let's get the fact that being worked in the 25-foot seasons. Come up with a plan for the spot and how it's going to, not affect or not take up even more wetland resource.
Yep.
And moving forward, the stone walls and garage should be at later meetings.
So the way to do that in terms of process is we're going to continue the public hearing. And then the next, after we get an EP number, you should update it to include whatever your dock plans are. At the same time, tonight, we can issue a enforcement order. And so what we would want to decide in the next half hour or so is what goes in the enforcement. And we have a draft motion, but I would like to see what other people think should go in there.
I mean, I think you could also, if you do want to give it 2 more weeks to wait and see what Mike is able to come up with. But I think it should be, complete. I think depending on where they may want access, if they are intending to alter something, then you don't want to require restoration at the same time. But I think either you consider letting it be restored or maybe you want wetlands specialist evaluate it from the beginning, but either restoration that it grows back or with some plantings if they want something more attractive.
I got yelled at in the past for not issuing enforcement order. Do you think this is a case where it's okay to wait 2 weeks because we're in close contact?
No, we've waited a long time.
Okay, and my second question is, senior.
I would be interested in a motion to continue for 2 weeks for drawings, more complete drawings, and maybe a narrative for restoration of existing conditions.
MDEP comments. So I so moved.
I'll second that.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
The motion is not addressing the other drainage issue on the stairway next to the area next to the stairway, which is now a drainage route directly to the sea, so to speak.
We saw the silt going down, yeah.
Yeah, so in my presentation, in our discussions we just had, that we're gonna be implementing that, adding that to the plans going forward.
Right, so
So
that would be part of the.
We'll see that in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I remember my senior role. Other discussions on Lake Nipmuc, we've been very careful to talk to people about what they're allowed to do for docks and beaches and stuff. Could I get a reminder? It's like 50 feet or some percentage of the total frontage.
10%
But this
of
is
total
specific.
frontage.
This is different because this was recently subdivided, so there's also considerations there.
Okay, if you could work with our agent to make sure you know exactly what's allowable.
Okay.
Because unlike the other lots on Lake Nipmuc that are like 50 feet wide, you've got a whole lot of lakefront.
Yeah.
So that might change.
That's what I was just saying, 10% of that.
So if you
We can open up the amusement park. That
So,
was a joke.
so if you can work with Isabella, making sure that that math is right before you come in with.
Yes, I appreciate that, yes.
I would be in favor of a beach or anything. That what you're saying?
No.
You just want a dock, right? You don't want a
What we're
beach.
saying is that needs to be.
Just a dock. I don't want no beach.
Yeah, you don't want any beach, do you? He doesn't want any beach.
You see what it looks like?
So there's a motion on the table right now to
Yeah.
continue to 2 weeks with the intention of new drawings, completed drawings and a narrative for moving forward with violation protocol.
Okay,
More question. Does the enforcement order figure into this motion that you're making? Are we doing
I
that?
think you would make another one.
Okay.
You haven't voted.
Are we amending?
I think it was more, well,
It's motions and seconded.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
But offer.
Motion passes unanimously. See you in 2 weeks.
Well, no, now we talk about the enforcement order.
oh, I thought that superseded the enforcement.
No, there-
Okay, no, all right, yeah, no, I'm here.
That's
what I thought.
What we just said is,
Yeah.
we're gonna continue for 2 weeks and you're gonna
I-
come back and hopefully DEP gives
Yes.
comments. Now there's a question. We have at least one commissioner saying, I want to have an enforcement order now. And the other one is saying, maybe we could wait another 2 weeks before we do any enforcement issues. So that's what we're talking about now.
I have a question. What is the enforcement order gonna gain? Most of the work is already done.
Well, I think the enforcement order pertains to the 860 feet, right? Is it on?
Yeah, I think no matter what, you should be issuing an order for the wetland impacts. I think, first of all, it would be a cease and desist all work in that area. However, there is no order of conditions, so there shouldn't be exterior site work anyways. But cease and desist, and then, you know, the commission can talk about if they want a wetland specialist to come out. I think Mike has said that would likely be Goddard Consulting, to evaluate whether regrowth is sufficient or if they want plantings. Or, you know.
I think planting would help that slope a lot. Because right now it's just some stumps and some kind of, like you have little tiny sprigs of hemlock sticking up there. There's not much good vegetation. There's also a ton of jumping worms on that property and.
Because of what, I'm sorry?
Jumping worms.
Oh.
And they changed the soil. The hydrology of the soil, and that's why it's so squishy. And you'll see that the soil is very pebbly, and that's from all the jumping worms there. So I think some plantings on that slope would be really helpful for erosion.
And again, that brings me back to completed plan of what you want to do with the slopes and conditions.
Right, so that, could that include what we want to see in 2 weeks? I'm not sure it needs an enforcement order. I think it's like,
I would like to see that, you know, bank stabilization, revitalization of the 25-foot no disturb and the implementation of no disturb in the 25-foot.
I think the reason you would do an enforcement order for the wetland area is because that's an order that's mandatory, whereas an order of conditions is permission to do work. It's kind of the framework in that sense. They're kind of, in the end, you're likely going to get all of the same materials. I mean, you're not coming up with the plantings yourself, so it doesn't make that much of a difference, but the enforcement order is mandating that work to be done, whereas an order of conditions, you don't have to do that work.
If we issue an EO today that says, don't do anything for 2 weeks, can we then update it in 2 weeks to say, and now do the following things? once we've had you're coming back with the plan. Okay, so that sounds like a good way to get something in writing and then not actually asking you to do anything until you come back in 2 weeks, other than that you're already doing. You're already not doing anything there.
Right, other than if the enforcement order is just gonna be dealing with that area that's been disturbed.
Yeah.
But something, and I could be wrong, but I heard the term cease and desist, don't do anything, don't do any work. I mean, he still has work to do on the site, so, I mean, that's
So
kind of,
we want to narrow it.
Yeah.
Within the 25-foot.
And-
If I'm not mistaken, doesn't this already have that you can work on the building, but you can't work on the grounds? Isn't that already implemented on this site?
There's the paperwork still in. There's nothing,
Okay, so there must be.
there's been no EO in the past, so he's operating under the fact that when he does work within 100 feet of the buffer without a valid permit from us, he's in deep trouble.
yeah, but I mean, we had an order of conditions in hand, just the clerical part and stuff, it was basically null and void from day one, but no one really realized that the signatures and the issue date, but I did the hearing, we were with the commission, you guys gave us an order of conditions, he was not working, and then he went to work.
Yep, so.
Just trying to get through that, but.
So at this point, then what I'm gonna look for is a motion for an EO so that the disturbed areas can be identified and rectified.
And I would want to include no work to be done within the 25-foot no disturb buffer.
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
A motion has been made to stop all work in the 25-foot no disturb zone and enforcement order to be installed on the existing
Do we figure it out?
890 feet of EBW disturbance in there.
So that's all you want as,
As of tonight.
Okay.
With the expectation that we may have other things that we are expecting him to do once you get out of the plan.
Any further discussion? Looking, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, all right, thank you, thanks for your time, I'll go.
Request to amend order of conditions for 37 Kingsley Lemon, number 2180868. Good evening. Welcome to the Conservation Commission.
You're muted, you might wanna.
Have a good night, guys. Trustees, registered commission for the sand place within the building of the existing brick patio with.
so this was a site that we were originally introduced to. There had been some tree work, some neighborhood disputes there. We met John and Jean through that discussion. They then filed a notice of intent for a dock to put in over the summer. They received their order of conditions, and then there was some sand placed within the pre-existing brick patio. The commission issued an enforcement order which stated to either remove the sand or file an amendment and submit documentation for where the sand was purchased for, which they did. They've now submitted the request to amend. You all have their description. So photographs that they've supplied. Abutters were notified and there was a legal ad, so those are the requirements for an amendment.
Discussion?
I think you might miss the part of the mulches about, I guess I just have a couple of questions. You came in because there was a dispute about trees being cut. So we're always concerned about trees being cut in the disturbing in the buffer zone. Then there was some mulch or some wood chips that you had come in to discuss, or somebody was not happy about. Then you had the dock permit, and then, so I'm just wondering, did you not realize that you should have asked us if you could put sand in? My whole point was this is as the Conservation Commission, we really like to educate people. And I feel like the 1, 2, and 3rd time that you came in might have been an education. Did we miss something that would have said in your head, oh, maybe we should ask before we put sand down a foot away from the lake? And the other thing I'd like to ask is, can you cite the Wetlands Protection Act? You're saying that it's permitted in the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't see anything cited here specifically. Can you please explain that? But I think that the wind is going to be the sand. It's very, very hot sand. Maybe not the water unless we get a really big storm. I'm just not comfortable with the sand being there. So anyway, can you speak to those things that I just asked?
So if I may provide clarification with regards to the mulch there, the wood chips, that was as a result of the cut trees. And I had asked if I could have, in that same hearing, had asked if I could repurpose those wood chips to the back and for some gardening. And that was allowed at that time. So I just wanted to clarify that. As we've previously stated, we are new homeowners. First time on a lake, first time in a conservation area. So that is one part, you know, again, having looked at the guidelines that is online, which is incredibly confusing, very tough to understand. It did not seem.
It's in your notes. I'm just asking you to cite directly what you're speaking to.
I'm sorry.
It's in your notes here that I have. You're citing
Do you recall where you got the information that you could replace sand? That's the question at hand is, do you recall where you got the information from the DEP handbook as to your ability to put sand in the location that you did?
There wasn't anything saying, there wasn't anything directly addressing that. And for, again, us being new to the area, new to the idea of a conservation commission or anything like that, having so many neighbors that actually have sand that go into the water on their properties, it just did not seem to be a concern when the sand, as you can see in the photos that we presented, does not in any way, shape, or form go into the lake water.
So the question, I'm going to read directly from your statement here. These measures comply with the performance standards outlined in the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act. And it does cite the general chapter of the Wetland Protection Act, but it doesn't cite where you are getting that information. So can you explain why you put that in your notes?
That would be my understanding and interpretation of, like I said, muddling through the DEP guidelines.
Hold on. I have a question before you go any further. Did you come in prior to putting the sand in and ask whether or not it was okay to put bark mulch in?
That had already been discussed when the tree work had been done at that hearing.
Was the answer that you received, you should come in and get an NOI, you're gonna be within 100 feet of the wetlands?
So again, I got
Yes or
permission.
no?
I-
Yes or no?
I'm confused. If I got permission from the board at the time when we had the tree cutting issue and the topic came up regarding the mulch, I'm confused as to why I would need to come back to ask permission.
I believe, if I'm remembering this story correctly, you asked for permission to put bark mulch in that area and you were told that you need to come in front of the commission.
No, sir, that did not, so what had happened in that meeting regarding the trees, there had been the question of what to do with the mulch. And the committee went back and forth, and I believe Mike was the gentleman who had said, look, it's their mulch. They could use it on the property. And I had said I wanted to use it in some garden beds out in the back, and that was okay.
Right.
I think their point is that the seating area is largely where the mulch is, not garden beds.
Right, and that, so again, there's, if you want, so the garden bed being the rock wall and kind of that whole thing, is not conducive for the original thought, but again, for purposes of wanting to repurpose that mulch that's sitting out front of the house, and that area wasn't really vegetated as such. There was a lot of poison ivy that was there. This was a way, again, kind of serving protection, still keeping in with materials that we've used from, again, the property. So we didn't bring in anything outside.
No, but you're filling in a no disturb area with mulch once you do that. I think the point we're trying to make is that it's one thing if you are a new homeowner and something happens like this, but we're on our third iteration of you taking steps and doing things without asking the Conservation Commission. So I think we're just all a little frustrated.
So I'm confused as to how this is a third iteration. We had the trees, and then now we have and then the dock.
Sand.
Well, hold on, and we requested and came in for the dock, knowing that is definitely, that was significant change in work and impacting the water directly. And now the sand, so I'm confused as to where this third iteration is.
Well, I'm looking at the mulch right here on the left hand of the picture. In the no disturb area. So that to me is the second iteration. All I'm saying is, we're trying to educate you, and I feel like even though we've tried to educate you, you have still done things that have impacted a resource area.
Okay, at this point, I'm gonna say that, that is already come and gone, and we're not here to chastise, we're here to make, recommendations or give them the permission that they're looking for to continue on. So at this point, Carl?
Yeah, Mike's not here, so I'll say it for him. We have to treat each request and each permit application in this amendment on its own merits. Having said that, we're now going to be setting a precedent for beach sand on Lake Nipmuc.
No, you're not. It's not a precedent.
Well, the other people on Lake Nipmuc are going to feel that.
Not everyone has a brick patio in the same way, so.
I agree, but what I'm saying is, if we make a determination that the way that they've done the beach sand and they put it in a enclosed area and they've taken steps to make sure that it's not going to get into the lake, and maybe we ask them to cover it up over the winter with a tarp or something, so that the wind doesn't. But what I'm saying is that in future months, if we approve this, I'm expecting that other people will come before us and say, hey, I want to have beach sand and I want to have it blocked off this way as well. And I'm just saying, if this is the way we want people in Lake Nipmuc and in town to be looking at beach sand use in the future. Having said that, I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to the way that they've been very careful to make sure beach sand isn't going to get stormwatered into it, And if you have some kind of a tarp that goes on it, when it's not windy, it's just like you've got a sandbox. You put a lid on the sandbox, it keeps things from pooping in it as well as the wind from getting into it. So maybe, so I would recommend that if we approve this amendment, that we have some kind of language that they're comfortable with about some kind of covering during the off season, during storms.
I don't, I'm not going backwards, I'm still on the sand. I'm not sure if you answered my question though, about where she got the information that the Wetland Protection Act said you can put sand there.
It's her interpretation of that those things meet
But you can't
the
even cite
performance
the
standard.
chapter.
It doesn't, it's the performance standard.
Yeah, but you need to have a wetland scientist or somebody that has the background knowledge to actually make those statements, because they're not even cited.
The act doesn't regulate buffer zone, so sand in a buffer zone wouldn't be something that needs to meet the Wetland Protection Act. This is largely under the bylaw that we're reviewing, unless and until sand is in resource area, which would be land under water.
That's what I'm talking, doesn't cite something that's not accurate when you're coming to a meeting of the Conservation Commission. It should, if you're writing this on paper and submitting this, it should be accurate.
I have another comment. I was told that the sand had come from
Kimball sand.
there was some receipt for small landscaping.
Yes.
So I was told, we were all told that it came, it was the same sand used at Town Beach, but I confirmed that was, I've never heard of that person or that company.
Do get our sand.
Can I ask, this is my third reiteration of this application, I think. And
Yeah, just took some minutes, yeah.
I don't want to go backwards, but I thought we had left this at the last meeting that it was discussed, that the applicant would go back and come back to us with a resolution to the issue. And what the applicant has done is come back to us with the issue. So I'm not sure what happened in between those two commission meetings where you generously
Gave them more time.
and give you more time, why don't you come on back with something new?
The
The information in front of us showed that they trying to illustrate that the sand is below the three inches below the wall that would allow it into the resource area, and that they have siltation in place so that way they're further protected. And
It was an existing condition when we did the site visit.
They're asking, what we have before us now is their amendment to what we approved before, or we're discussing. And so their amendment is to request, they're requesting us to allow them to continue having beach sand there in the future.
I understand that.
So that's their resolution to the problem.
As of the last meeting, we hadn't done the legal ad or the butter notices, so that would.
so this is just the legal side, getting it past the hurdle.
I do think that there should be a plan, that there was going to be a plan.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, unless also on the sidewalk, I noticed, the top few inches of the sand was very, very, very silty and very light and could easily be blown off, especially in this windstorm.
3 inches.
Blizzard enough.
I actually, if I may, I do have video, two separate videos that I can submit to Isabella with the timestamp, and they are taken the days after we've had major rainstorm. And even that latest one, not this recent one this week, but the prior one that had produced microburst. And in the video, you can see that there is no sand on the wall whatsoever. So the sand does not move.
So.
Geomorphology, that, yeah. is it
Maybe take a
geomorphology?
video this weekend, we're getting a northeaster.
I respectfully disagree, the geologist and the geomorphologist, geologist specialty. It doesn't move.
I just throw something.
Erosion happens.
I don't know if it's an issue, but it might be. Is this a floodplain?
No, it's.
Flood insurance maps? I mean, is like,
Bug has an associated flood height, but because of the retaining wall, I
It's not gonna over. I don't think the retaining wall height is up to.
So you're saying the retaining wall is above the height of flood? Because I guess my said, you're bringing in fill, so you're limiting you're taking away storage area from the flood zone.
Can you pull up the pictures, the illustrations that they sent over?
The retaining wall was there historically. So
Right, but if the retaining wall is below the top of the flood zone, and you're filling in behind the wall, you're taking up available capacity for
walls, if there's.
one, but I don't know if that's an issue there. I just, I mean, the line in blue is.
I don't think we have elevation, that's maximum.
So basically, it's just a lake.
if the water level in the lake gets high enough to overtop the retaining wall, there's gonna be a whole lot of other hurt elsewhere. in the
Well,
lake.
that's what, that it's for, designed for a 500 flood, and so to give capacity for.
And being sand, I'm assuming that the water is gonna flow through the sand better than.
The sand's gonna float as soon as water hits.
The point is, the sand takes up volume that the water would otherwise take. So with the sand being there, the water is going to come up higher than it would otherwise. But
If I may ask,
The vice chair,
Who, me?
yes. Mike who's not here. What particularly distinguishes this application differently than any other in your mind?
Well-
That may be coming before us at a beach.
Okay, I think my vision is that eventually we'll have a code enforcement officer on the lake, putting around in the rubber raft that the fire department is probably gonna buy. And we will look around and say, okay, where are the docks? And then we can check and see if they have a dock permit. We can look and say, okay, they have a beach. Have they done any paperwork with us saying that the beach has been approved? And I'm hoping that over time, people will come to us. Now, there are other people who have beaches that are up elevated. We'd say that's great. There are other people who have beaches that are look to be going straight down into the water. And at that point, we would tell them, I'm sorry, we're now in the 21st century. We're not going to allow you to have that kind of a beach with sand going, that you can have sand between your toes in the water and not, because we're now getting more ecologically sensitive. So over the course of time, my position is that if we say it's okay to have sand elevated up behind a barrier and you're confident that it's not going to get into the lake, then we can expect a whole lot of other people on the beach, on the lake, to say they want a sandy beach on their property the same way that we would have approved this particular.
And I'm still not confident that this sand, can I just ask why you're so set on having this beach sand there?
So I have nieces and nephews. As I said before, my niece fell down and like scraped her knee really bad. And it was because they were uneven pavers. So we just thought it would be a good idea to put some of this down. And it solved the problem. And it, we did a straw wattle as well, like you guys wanted us to. And yeah, that was the reason we put it down in the first place.
But there are other alternatives, I would think. I just don't know why you're fighting so hard for the sand.
That's their aesthetic choice.
correct. This was a inexpensive alternative to redoing the entire patio, which is in disarray. We did try having it, we had people come and professionally pressure wash it, and we tried as much as we could to try to save it and not have to alter anything. But this was an inexpensive way to kind of beautify the area, provide a safe place, because I also have elderly parents that are in their 80s and 90s. And again, seats that wobble, them walking, it was just unsafe. And the sand is definitely takes care of all of those safety concerns. Not only that, but it does provide a really great kind of feeling of enjoying the lake and having our own little paradise.
Sand is safer for children to run around on than patio, even if the patio is level.
At this point, I'm gonna ask one question to Isabella. The reason why we're here is to either amend and get this amended or rejected. Is that the reason why this is in front of us tonight?
So tonight is the hearing for the amendment, so you would reissue a new order of conditions. The reason that I originally suggested during the enforcement discussion and amendment is because there still is outstanding conditions associated with the dock. They still need to get their Chapter 91 license. So adding on to this amendment made more sense than half closing that one and filing a new one, because you can't have two permits at the same time. I think amending the order, you can impose conditions, as Carl said, if you want it covered. If there are other conditions you want, and then once they acquire their Chapter 91 license and apply for a certificate of compliance, you would then have an opportunity to see if sand has migrated and if any corrective actions need to be taken. I think in my discussions with town council, because an enforcement order saying they could either remove the sand or file an amendment, which, I apologize if it was me that suggested filing an amendment, but that you kind of pigeonhole yourself into two options. And if you deny this, you would then potentially be issuing a new enforcement order, which could be appealed. And I don't know what you would be requiring besides removing the sand, which was the two options you gave in the beginning. So in my opinion, issuing an amendment with conditions you think are necessary. Again, this was previously disturbed patio, different from other sites on the lake because the patio and retaining wall are assumed to be prior to the bylaw being in place, prior to 2012. Certain, permissions come with having disturbed areas. I think as long as the sand doesn't move, I don't see why it may not have been permitted in the beginning if they had filed this at the same time as the dock.
So at this,
I'll propose a second condition. The first one is to have a cover to make sure the sand doesn't blow in during wind events. The second one.
During wind or winter?
How about just all the time?
Well,
So
let me go.
Because my suggestion would be winter when they take the dock out.
And the second one would be photographic or video evidence. And I want to tie this into the trigger for when we have someone going out, when Deshang goes out to 23 Cape Road to look at the stormwater stuff there. There's a certain kind of thing, certain kinds of storms that trigger when you want to take photos and stuff. We should tie that in and asking them to provide those for the duration of the enforcement order. And that way, when we are in a position to issue the certificate of compliance, we'll have the video evidence showing whether there's been any escape of sand during those kind of events. So is it like when there's more than an inch of rain in an hour or something like that?
Well, note that they don't live here.
Pardon? Oh,
They don't live
so it'd be hard for them to do that. Okay.
But WIP is every 2 weeks or after every major rain event.
And what's the definition of a major rain event?
Half an inch.
Half an inch, okay.
Or they can just cover it and leave the wall there.
so
They're at the property and that would keep sand from going everywhere.
at this point, I'm looking for a motion to accept the amended
I would confirm if those conditions are okay. With that.
with the conditions, is
So
with
which
the
one?
approval from the applicants.
But they
So-
have to decide what the conditions are.
So except, impose, covering the sand over the winter and offering, video documentation after, heavy rainstorms for sand migration.
The wall has to stay.
Absolutely.
Yep, and that's absolutely fine. We could set up a separate camera to capture that so that it's closer. So the pictures that you see now are actually a camera that we do have, security cameras that we do have set up. If you need something more detailed, we can set a camera up lower by the retaining wall to capture that. And that's not an issue. We had already planned on covering the sand off season because we do have, there's lots of ducks that come up and other wildlife, as well as a neighbor's dog.
The covering that you use, you can't use a cheap tarp because it will wither over time with all the wind and weather, and plastic will then fluff
Oh, no.
off. Have to use something heavy duty, canvas, whatever.
So
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm very, very environmentally conscious, which is why, I mean, the amount of stuff I've pulled out of that lake just being out there. Yeah, no, trust me, I definitely do not want to.
all right. Your opinions have been noted. Your opinions have been heard. At this point, it's my understanding that you understand that a camera or documentation of rain events needs to be available and then needs to be covered.
Yes.
Yes.
So at this point,
Forgive me, I would feel much more comfortable if all of the things you just said meet with the approval of the conservation agent in terms of the type of camera, the type of setup, so that it's not just somebody having a camera on their roof. That Isabella, work out that with the applicant as it proceeds.
Yeah, I think if your intention is for documentation that there hasn't been wind swept, you kind of need an angle that's looking at the water. So I don't know if you do want that to be 2 weeks or post rain events. Kind of at the shoreline course. And whether that timeline is how long you're expecting to want those photos.
Then I'm looking for recommendation from the board.
When do you expect the dock permit to be finalized that we'd be able to issue a COC?
Have you had discussion started with chapter 91 and license?
So I need to submit the ad, and then it's another 30 days of them processing. And I would expect probably within the next 2-3 months.
Okay.
So I think chapter 91 can be very slow, so
Yes.
I think generally it could be 6 months.
Right, and that's getting your permit, and then there's the construction, and then there's time after the construction to make sure that the grass grows in. So it sounds like if we're going this way,
I mean, my point is the order of conditions is valid for 3 years, and I don't expect them to submit a photo every 2 weeks for 3 years unless that's what you want.
Okay, so when do you believe that you could get a tarp in place?
Oh, we had planned on, I believe either this weekend or next weekend, because we have to pull the jet ski out, as well as the dock. So at that time, kind of the finishing up of the winterizing, as well as, pulling out the chairs and table and whatnot.
Sounds like we'd want to have Isabella go out after you've got the tarp in place, and that would meet what you're saying to make sure that we think that they've done an adequate job of securing the sand from blowing away.
Yes.
Okay. So given that there's going to be a pretty heavy tarp on top of it, I don't think I would not ask that I would not require any photographic evidence.
So we need inspection after they've winterized rather than photos.
After they believe they've winterized it and they've secured it, and that would be with that you'd be able to give us a report at the next meeting in 2 weeks as to whether that was, you consider that satisfactory or not.
And that she feels that where the cameras are placed are adequate to do the job of recording.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm fine with that. Just the one thing I wanted to say is that the concern with precedence and that, yes, it's gonna be a problem, but there's only one beach on Lake Nipmuc in my mind. We have not permitted any beach, and I am not going to stand by and have people bring in sand to refresh a quote unquote grandfather beach, because I don't consider there are any grandfather beaches. So-
I agree. Yeah, it's kind of a conundrum.
Part of it
It's
is,
one the beach is gonna compact and it's gonna get dirty and it's gonna be tempted to.
part of it is we can say, this isn't a beach, this is a sandbox.
This is the terrace. That's what basically.
So I'm looking for,
What he just said.
I so move. Okay, I move to issue an amendment to the order of conditions for 37 Kinsley Lane, DEP 218-0868, with a special condition that within the next 2 weeks, they would contact Isabella, who would go out and inspect the site and determine that the winterization will prevent sand from impacting the buffer zone, and also to review camera placement, so that you would have a camera that would be adequate to show if there are any erosion after a nor'easter. Have a second, great.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions?
I'll go nay.
2 nays.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-2.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll have the permits for you guys next week.
All right, excellent. I had a super quick question. And this is, again, we have in front of the house what would you call that? An overhang?
Yeah, overhang.
An overhang that has to be reshingled. Is there any concern with having a dumpster brought in and having that work done? Obviously, once we receive permit from the town. But as for conservation, is there any issue with that?
I mean, I'll see your building permits, and view it through the portal of building permits and dumpster permits. If you're outside of 100 foot, you're fine, but typically maintenance on your house is okay.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you, have a good evening.
Thanks.
It's- Additional topics for discussion. A request for certificate of compliance with 220 Millville Street, DP number 2180848. Review the request for a COC for 220 Millville Street. Order of conditions issued 7/26/2024.
How is the sidewalk? You okay?
No,
No.
Hold on, let it vote.
So we met John Mastrioni, the building, manager, or health officer. In my opinion, this looks similar to 75 Blacksmith Street. There's still some ruts and concerns on the outer edge along the limit of disturbance. I think it looked relatively stable, but some of those ruts maybe need to be filled and seeded. And so I would think a partial is sufficient. And Mike left, but I don't think Lobster would be against receiving a partial if there's still more work. I don't think the silt fence is ready to come out, and I don't want to give permission for that. So you could deny if you want to wait. I think there's sometimes some issues with sales when there's an open order, so having the partial is sometimes beneficial in that sense. That's up to the commission. I don't know, Susan, did you upload photos?
Yes, yeah.
That
Yeah,
makes sense to me, partially.
There's a bunch of, yeah, still washouts.
This silt fence is largely following the 50-foot buffer and only portion of the house is in.
I think the silt fence is doing its job, but I just wonder what happens with the up there.
Maybe they can fix it. I mean, fix it.
So there was a rut here where they put the additional wattle in. They might add some riprap along this driveway to help with this one. That's on the northern side.
Gary, do you have any comments?
No, I just thought it needs correction.
Right.
What's the advantage
So-
of a commercial?
There's an ability to market
They
it
can
easier.
sell it easier.
Okay,
No, he was talking about riprap.
And that's, I'll, when everybody talks about their comments, then I'll speak on my observations as well. Susan, what are your observations, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with like the partial because, you know, there's some sort of a fixture of the slope, washouts.
Yeah, there were a lot of washouts there. Some of
Yeah.
them were pretty deep. And there was a lot of silt that you could see in that picture, but there's also another one. Yeah, all over the site. So it needs to be fixed, because once that fence comes out, that silt fence comes out, it's just going right downhill.
So this was my interpretation from when I was there. I spoke with John and I gave him our concerns. On the northerly side, there was some exposed dirt that he has intentions of covering with bark mulch in order to stabilize that area. And there's two real areas that were washed out, one being at the end of the driveway, which is a natural water flow location. So he said in order to mitigate that, he is going to take riprap and put it in where the rills are, so that way there, it slows the water flow down to the wetlands and therefore should mitigate the washout in that area and one behind the deck area.
So
So,
you can also delay voting if you want to go out and see the riprap after he puts it in again.
That might be helpful, because there's a little bit of mess there.
so I'll move to table this for consideration at our next meeting in 2 weeks.
So,
motion's been moved and seconded. All those in discussion?
The discussion, I believe the agent should communicate to the applicant that we're expecting to see any significant mulching, riprapping, other work that he's expecting to get done in order to get the house ready for sale. As opposed to us giving him in effect a blank check saying, here you go, and then you can go market. I feel that he should get his major landscaping done before he puts it on.
A partial COC, wouldn't that give us still that right to holding to accountability?
The problem is we've heard in other sites is if he sells it as it is right now, and then we go to the new owners and say, oh, by the way, your COC is not completed, you have to do a whole lot of work before we are happy. No, I want to have him do that work before I put something on the market.
I agree.
So that's my discussion. I'm ready for a vote.
Any other discussion?
Just that I don't think bark mulch is a good answer to stabilize it. It's just like covers over the product, doesn't let the grass grow. So it depends on whether it's a slope, I suppose, on the glass.
It's not really it's
wrong.
It's mild.
On one side. On the other side.
Yes.
But that's what the grass is.
There's grass everywhere, but there's still water getting through the grass, you know?
And right, that's what he's proposing.
Hanging on the other side too, what I'm saying is, rather around, you know, as we walked around the house, there was still a lot of grass, but it was going through the grass, like there was a whole bit of stuff there, around the whole property, it seemed mostly. So it just needs to be tightened up somehow. I'm not an engineer, I don't know how to do that. What would you suggest, Peter?
Let the applicant decide what they're doing, and then we decide whether we like it or not.
Okay.
Hopefully you get grass growing where the dirt is, so the dirt can't migrate, right? So it's-
Is that a motion?
Yes.
So a motion been made and seconded, discussions were made, all in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. And conservation areas planning outline.
I don't remember, did I print it out for people?
I don't
You
People,
sent out the
you want it
narrative.
printed?
I would appoint.
I have it on my computer.
Harry, give me a minute. I want to see it.
Yeah, sure.
You want to use mine?
Proposal prepared by Commissioner Terrence Moore, which outlines a planning approach for the protected conservation land in Mendon.
Yeah, you should have gotten about a 12-page document. You don't have obviously in front of you, but it was in the transmission. I'll try to do this very quickly because I know it's getting late. And
Sorry, I want to know what you have to say. You listen to the so don't rush.
I know I will be efficient. How about that? Well, a little background. I've been doing protected area plans since 1974. That makes me older than I want to admit that I am, but it is true. What I'm going to present to you is a relatively standardized approach to protected areas planning. And when Isabel and I sat down and we talked about whether we could use perhaps one area as a pilot to test out the planning process, because part of your duties as a conservation commission is to do planning for the conservation areas within Mendon. So this is going to be a very brief discussion, and we'll get you the larger one as perhaps by tomorrow or so. Go ahead. The planning objectives of any kind of protected area planning approach is really these first two. The latter one, which is to promote public understanding and support, is something that has come into being relatively short period of time ago, because it has been understood that the more people understand, the more people utilize, the more people can appreciate, and the appreciation leads to support for the need for continued resource protection. The activity that they're going to present to you is consistent with the Commission Act of the legislature in 1957. There are some things that have to be done before we could even talk about process. One, we need to just do a very good overview of Mendon's conservation areas, just to come to a concise agreement of what it's really about. Carl had raised with me the other last time this came up that Mendon probably may have a different process of selecting a task force or an entity responsible for doing this. That again is a pre-planning activity. Description of the public involvement process. I am a great proponent of the public involvement, and I think we have to have a strategy dealing with any type of community-owned property that people can be involved in and support. And then there's the development of an overall purpose and goals and objectives of Mendon's conservation areas. I don't know that that statement exists at this point in time. And if it does not, then it needs to be built and decided upon.
There, I have a question. This plan, does it only involve Mendon only conservation land, or does it involve Metacomet and?
It could involve Metacomet, and Anne has seen the document and Mazar, and she asked me if she could share it with Metacomet. And I told her that would be fine, but let me talk to the commission first before.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the only property it maybe wouldn't include would be like the Department of Fish and Wildlife Management trustees, or Premier Woods with the trustees, because those aren't owned by the town, nor do they have a conservation restriction that we enforce, which is typically, we have a relationship with other trustee properties and other Metacomet properties where we have more of a relationship than just someone else owns the land entirely.
Those are where there are linkages between the.
Which there will be.
So that's bullet item.
What's that? How's it-
Figuring
yeah.
it all out.
We have a variety of ownership in Mint Hill areas. In that like Pleasant Road and then.
Okay, so there's, work to be done.
Well, think about it this way. If Mendon had a state park inside of our town, the way other towns do, the state park is not our conservation land, but we would definitely want to include it in any conservation plan that covered the entire town, at which point we'd reach out to the state entity responsible for that and say, hi, can we get some of your time? Same way we will try and get the part of the state government responsible for managing that slice next to the Quist property.
Who wants Mendon Town Forest?
Mendon.
So
Is that like the state?
Mendon owns the Mendon Town Forest.
I think he's.
Oh, they need some signs in there, I'll tell you.
Just.
Yep. Yep, that's what I just wanted to point that out to Bob. You'd already covered what he was asking.
Okay, we need, whatever this task group becomes, needs to use some kind of rational and objective way of selecting the initial area that would be planned for. And also a determination of what is the effective period of the plan. Most plans are, Peter may know that in the National Park Service, it's 15 years. It takes 15 years to get it done as well, but but that's something that people have to come to some consensus in terms of how long they want this to be effective and what can happen during that period. Go ahead. Okay, the process. Simple, number one, every plan contains a description of the area, how it got to be a conserved area, and some of the important attributes. A conservation area purpose statement. A purpose statement really sets forth what everyone agrees is the reason this property is protected and what can happen to it. It is by implication a statement that precludes certain things from occurring. If you're a conservation area, you're not going to have a ball field. And you don't have to say that, but in constructing the purpose statement, that implication is there. Significance is another factor, and significance simply means is why is it being preserved? Why is it important? What makes it special than other properties, even other conserved properties? It could be certain historic resources. It could be certain complexes of wetlands that are characteristic of this portion of Massachusetts. Fundamental and important resources. Fundamental resources are those on the property that are specifically tied to the property's purpose and significance. They are the core of the resource. Important resources are things that might be there, but really weren't anticipated to be in the purpose and significance of the property. The example I think I used in the paper you're going to see is we may have a wonderful wetlands complex that's significant and that's fundamental, but there's some stone walls on the property that may give the ability to interpret agricultural activities during a certain period. That's not why we're protecting the property, but it's an important resource, so it gets listed. Condition assessment. Let's go to the next slide and then come back after that, okay? Values. Resources are tangible. You can touch them, you can see them, you can smell them, whatever the case may be. They are tangible resources. Values are intangible. They are feelings, they are reactions, they often are the reason people contemplate their place in nature. I'm not a great philosopher, but that's what values are. I'm going to give you an example. The guy on the left, sitting over there, is all alone with nature. What's going through his mind? How many fish are in the sea, or
Serenity.
whatever the case. Serenity, feeling, being with nature, communicating with a different world than going to work every day. Pardon me? It could be. The stone wall. We don't have a lot of stone walls in New Jersey equal to yours. We do have some in the north. We have sand in the south. But when you look at a stone wall, and a lot of people do this, how all those stones get there? Somebody had to put those in a cart. They had to pile them up. What was the purpose of it? Was it just agriculture? Was it sheep? Was it cows? Whatever the case may be. That's an intriguing thought that a resource can make you think about. But how the hell did that get there? There's no damn many of them. The one in the middle, I've used on numerous occasions. My ancestry report shows that I'm 82% Irish, a little English, and some Scot. Have any of you been to Fredericksburg, Virginia? Peter, you been to Fredericksburg?
Just driving through.
Fredericksburg? At Fredericksburg, there is a stone wall and a sunken road, and some grass in front of it. It used to be a battlefield, but in the 50s, houses appeared all over that battlefield, but there's still an apron. And you can stand in that sunken road looking over that wall with Marie's Heights back above you. And in 1862, a lot of young men crossed the Rappahannock, walked up that hill to that stone wall, and those cannons on top of that rise in the ground, and were blown to pieces. This is the flag of the 69th New York Irish Division. A lot of those guys came off the boat just before they put their uniform on. Some of them may have been relatives of my ancestors, who knows. I can stand on that wall, and many people do, and remark about it, and just wonder about the bravery of these young men just walking into that line of fire. And there is a Confederate soldier who in that evening brought them water, an act of kindness. That's not just a wall and a road or a piece of grass. That's experiencing a historic event. So that's value. We like to protect values in conservation areas because they're the attachment of people often to those resources. Excuse me. I'll go back. I'm sorry, you need to go back. Okay, the fifth one is to undertake and using available data, because you're not going to do a lot of research here. The condition assessment of the resource of the values, and what are some improvement opportunities that may be available to improve the condition of those resources and the experience. Normally you develop a vision statement for a protected area. This is an example. It's not everything that necessarily pertains to a given place in Mendon. But it is always stated in the present. It's not there will be, or maybe hopefully in the future. The vision statement is current. People will understand, enjoy, and appreciate the resources. Interpretive themes. Interpretive themes are what allows people to connect with the resource. I use an example which you'll see in the paper of a sugar maple tree. I've been to lots of different countries where they have a little plaque in front of the piece of vegetation that says sugar maple and then the Latin word. And you're supposed to understand from that everything that you do. But a theme allows you to make the sugar maple real in the sense of its own universe. It is that people make syrup. There's a whole culture surrounding that. It is a larger story than just the tree. That's what themes do. Peter was a ranger, so he gave talks that were based on some theme in some park. Visitor use and visitor experience objectives come from those themes, and they break them down into stories. This is when you do a walk in Hopedale, they're telling you a story based on a theme of industrialization in your region. But the story is, let's walk to the museum and talk about the machines and the folks who work there. One of whom lived in the house I own. So that's a process of doing themes and developing relationships and stories. It's often stated as visitors will understand X, Y, Z. Visitors view, visitors learn about, visitors are exposed to. It's the visitor experience. It's what you're trying to achieve when you ask people to come to the property, appreciate it, and they will do something in their mind.
Can we teach some about beavers?
Pardon?
Can we teach some about beavers?
Beavers?
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of them.
Yes.
Once you have the resource conditions understood, what perhaps should happen to the resources in the future, once you have the storyline, then you are able to apply all of that to a mapping exercise and create sub areas. It's like zoning. It's really no different than zoning. You may have a research area where you want educators, scientists to come in and do some work, but it's also an educational area for high school kids or whatever the case may be, college students doing their research papers. You may have a moderate intensity zone where you would have trails. But how about with not just trails, how about some interpretive exhibits along that trail? How about some benches where so the guy that was at the lake, you can join him in contemplating your location in nature and doing the rest of that. And you go through this entire permitted uses. It's like a zoning ordinance, but it applies to conservation land. And then, of course, there's the actions that are necessary to continue to protect the resource. These actions are over the 5 years or 10 years of the plan. These are the things we have to do to make it work. And it should be as quantitative as possible so that people can evaluate what the plan did and whether it was successful or not. In Quebec. Joe over here, we met Joe today. Joe over here asked at the last meeting about forest management. Well, forest management could be a sub-plan coming after the general plan for an area. Okay, that's why I threw that in there.
To me, that's one of the most important things about us owning all of this land is maintaining it to the point where it doesn't become a liability through overgrowth or mismanagement.
But, and there's a, try to put this way, it's understandable. Forest management plans vary depending upon what the objective of the forest management plan is, but also what the objective of the conservation area is. You would, for instance, probably not do a clear cut in a conservation area. You might do some selective cutting. And that's a forest management plan, but it's dependent on the resources, not just let's go cut trees. Visitor use and experiences generally and by sub area. What are the rules? What is the visitor experience in each of those zones? What is the experience on a trail? What is the experience if you're having picnic tables? Is there an experience where a local naturalist can come out during an evening and talk about night sky? Because this is the best night sky place in all of Mendon, whatever that may be. So you're thinking use as well as protection.
The Massachusetts Trail Riders Association, would they be a good resource in a lot of these things that we're trying to accomplish? Massachusetts Trail Riders Association?
Yeah, they're a user group. They are part of the public.
Right, but don't they implement a lot of these things?
I assume they do, but I assume the Boy Scouts have been active here in Mendon, marking trails or helping out. I think you want to have a wide net when you're working on this, but let's get the area designated first that we want to start with, because some types of trails may not be applicable to an area. Other types of trails may be better. And there may be other sources that are skilled at doing that. But again, the experience is driven by the themes. The themes create visitor objectives, and this is the implementation of the experience. And this is my last slide. Every plan that goes for 5 or 10 years is worthless unless you have individual one-year action plans to follow up. It's the 1-year action plan that kicks everything off. It has to be realistic. There have to be dollars available to make it work. There have to be partners that are willing to come in and do things at the conservation area. And there's a whole bunch of assignments that have to be made. The town has to decide how it wants to relate to the conservation area in a plan. The land use committee has a role certainly in all of these activities. But what you're trying to do is build from the resource out to the visitor a sense of appreciation and ownership of the resource. That's the objective of all protected area planning. So what I guess we'd like to do is figure out from you, not necessarily tonight, but who should be involved, and what is the best way to bring this kind of approach either before the select board if necessary, or whomever else within the community we think should be involved.
I was gonna wait until it was finished.
That's why you called them.
Are there any questions for the compliance commission?
A lot of the documentation that you're talking about is going to be found in the conservation restrictions, which is conservation easements, because I've read a lot of them over the past 5 years. And the first couple of pages of each of them is exactly what you were talking about. What is the reason for why we have it, and what's allowable and not. Steal a lot of that. That's why reaching out to Metacomet would be a good first step.
Right, and I think whatever area is selected, there's a lot of research that has to go into how it became.
Yes.
And if there are deed restrictions,
The
they
CR will be very specific,
rule.
for example.
deed
All of them,
restrictions.
almost all of them say no motorized vehicles, no ATVs. That's come up recently. There are 2 areas of town which I believe would benefit from this kind of thing. Well, there's the town forest, but that's relatively small. One of them is the Muddy Brook Valley that's extending to the east of North Avenue. That's considered by many people as, quote, the crown jewel. Mendon has spent a lot of time and money making sure that nobody ever gets to develop that valley area because they like having, and there's constantly arguments in town meeting of, no, we need to have more development, we want to build houses in it. No, that's the best part of it. But I think the first place to go is, as you had some slides from Inman Quisson, not just because we have a lot of information about it, but also because next fall is the 100th anniversary camporee of the Boy Scouts. The chair of the select board is very involved in that project. So I believe that there would be a lot of interest on the part of at least one member of the select board if you said, what can we do in the next year that will make a better experience for the Boy Scouts coming in? There's probably going to be discussions within the town of, we've got to do something about the parking, the roads, the infrastructure, the porta potties. Someone in town,
That area isn't conservation land though.
but is it, what's the definition
What's
of
your
that?
distinction? You're saying that's.
It's in the
purpose
care of the
of-
select board, it's not assigned to the Concom.
Okay,
So unless you want to just do trails, but I don't think our starting point should be
okay,
assigned to Concom.
okay.
Unless they want to put it into the care of the commission, but it is. The deed is to select board and
Okay,
parks, whereas other properties are deeded.
okay,
to
so just the land use committee get involved in that?
Certainly,
Who's the select,
because, and that was the question with the base state riders, right?
who's the select board delegated?
That whole site, there's multiple sites there, right? There's the Kell, or the top of the hill, but then there's
There's
a budding parcel.
2 access roads, there's the Park North. Yeah,
That'd be trails, a separate parcel, but the camporee is largely happening in the fields, which are not
Yes.
protected.
right, but if we can say, well, the Boy Scouts are here, they can have the experience of wandering down in the trails in that area. And what can we create in the next 11 months that would, in terms of signage, picnic benches, or all those other things you were talking about?
I wouldn't limit the conservation area. I wouldn't limit it to just area parcels owned by the conservation. If it's owned by the town and the selectmen, yes, it might have slightly different purpose, maybe a little bit more for recreation, or there's a structure there that the town uses for storage. But no, that's,
And
it's
this
a
gets back,
conservation area in my mind, first and
and
foremost.
this gets back to the idea of a task force, that you would be going to the select board and creating a task force that would very easily be able to do select board land, because it's not a Concom activity. It is a task force activity on which Concom members will be there, Metacomet members will be there, select land use committee members will be there.
In my opinion, the task force would be a subcommittee of the Concom,
Okay,
and then potentially a lot of towns have open space and recreation committees. So I think in large,
Yeah.
it would focus on kind of this.
Let me not disagree with you at all, but you have to look at doing planning for these things as something that is going to go beyond an event. It is something that becomes permanent, it becomes open to the public, and those nice little signs that talk about the sugar maple are become part of the community, not just people coming in from outside. So it's kind of critical to select the property you're going to deal with to make sure it's going to be successful. There are things you could spin off to do for events. I mean, some of the signage that would be used on a conservation property is no different than what might be used. You know, the water goes downhill into the muddy brook. Those are educational.
Another possibility might be the Shirley Jackson area, which is at right near the middle school. It's at the corner of North Avenue and Hopedale Street. That's owned by the town. It's zoned so that they can have educational things happening there. They could have like a 4-H fair, but nothing much has happened for this. So that's another area to explore. And I don't know if that's conservation land either. But
That's owned by Gary Smith. So
yeah.
my suggestion would be to start with something that doesn't have much infrastructure or public use, because then we can kind of start from the beginning. We did just get the Maple Farm Muddy Brook CR with the trail network that's going to have to be built in the next phase. Yeah, so that's partially on Maple Farm, partially on Shirley Jean Smith, and then extending through Hopedale Parklands back into Muddy Brook. So whether we pick Muddy Brook or the Maple Farm property, in the trail grant, there is large boardwalks, smaller boardwalks, benches, and those kinds of things where you could build a better narrative throughout the whole site. And the part with budget, now we have $100,000 to work with.
Page CR to draw text from.
But I think
You could be a system planner.
Maybe part of that, a few companies for maybe some carbon offsets, some funding.
Peter, I think, this is a conservation commission activity under the statute, but I think it would be very helpful to also have a small group of the land use committee, because they seem to be more active in getting it's then become a fodder for the planning process. So I think if we could form a subcommittee here, but also invite the land use committee to do a similar activity and have those two meet, be much better. Yeah.
I think a subcommittee with other members brought in,
Yeah.
but I like in theory it's top down from the Concom.
Yeah. But if you don't have problems, I guess what Isabel and I would like to do is explore step one of this process, and who should be involved, and about and talk to you all periodically, like the NITMUC committee. That's,
I would float the idea of giving your slide presentation to the select board after the town meeting. Breathing room.
yeah. And you would, I have a much more detailed document that you will have. I think you're all the other. I think
A 12-page document?
yeah, it's a 12-page, this is just a summary of. You have questions at the next meeting.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I think it's great. Happy help.
I do want to, I asked Isabella, because she put a little note in the packet, about $100,000 grant from the trail. And I asked her who wrote that application, and she said she had a small goal. So I just wanted to congratulate her. 100 Gs.
I was expecting her to talk about that.
Awesome, nice. Is that your first grant?
That would be the second one. I did get a Great Communities grant earlier this year.
Sweet.
And I wrote the environmental sections for the DER grant. But
All that indicates is that she can get 3 and 4 and 5.
Maybe.
Okay, thank you for listening.
So
It's 9:45.
I'm just to closure, what's the next step? Are you going to do?
Next step, I think, is for Steve and me to sit down and talk a little bit about who else in the land use committee. Baser, I assume, should be involved in this discussion. She's the leader in land acquisition, and then come back to you with where we are on the first steps.
I think we'll also work on the descriptions of our areas. The website got very clunky, and we did have a list of all of our trails, and now it's kind of in this facilities module, so it's really hard to tell our land. So we want to update the website with a better document showing where things are and stuff.
It's also, there are, I won't say they're technical things, but I have no idea who does mapping around here in the town, if anybody.
If
Does anybody do?
Somebody
that?
gradually
We outsource to the Central Mass Regional Planning Agency.
I am generously forgiving you my exorbitant hourly fee. Consultants, pardon?
Do you want to make some maps? Do you like to make some maps?
Would you like to make some maps?
No, I don't do maps.
We have a resource who graduated with the specialization.
Well, that's what I
Yes.
thought, but I mean, at some point in time, we need to just think about who are the doers that feed into this process in terms of technical capabilities.
Who makes the town website?
The town clerk. If you want an update, send an email not to Ellen Egg or send it to town clerk because she now has an assistant.
Well, are you asking about like my webpage? I do my own webpage. I don't do like meeting postings, but I do my site. I wasn't involved with the migration to the new website, so some of those changes I didn't have.
Don's curious, so it's really good. That's something
Yeah,
that
but
he's always looking to make a spare buck.
let us get together and also our little group meetings. And that's pretty much.
Update. Okay.
Okay, peer review proposal to draft wetland regulations. Review the proposal prepared by VSC Group dated 10/3/25 for peer review assistance in drafting wetland protection regulations under the revised amended wetland protection bylaw. Bylaw chapter 28.
Were they the only one that we received the?
Yeah, I've called quite a few places. They had some grant closures and things in the summer that they weren't able to get through their to-do list, but they did get me. BSC Group responded to me. I had tentatively spoken with LEC Environmental, who said they could get a proposal, but they also didn't do that before the summer. So they are one firm that I know I can follow up with that potentially has staff to do this. But I did get a few no's from smaller firms that don't have capacity to help.
I'd like to get a second number to see if it's out of line, so if you can't follow LSC.
I was expecting 5 to 20,000 as an estimate.
So it's kind of in the middle.
You're sure that's
This one's
right?
11/2 or something.
It's a little basic. It's got a little addendum that has hourly fees if you do, if you want something, want something else.
For a principal, yeah.
I mean, DeShang's is $3.50 an hour.
It does, forgive me, because I got part of this previous discussion. I'm not sure I understand the scope of the regulatory document. Is it
Okay,
like Bellingham?
I'll try and take a shot at it. Massachusetts state law says they protect wetlands. The DEP regulations, the CMRs protect the wetlands. Mendon has a bylaw that protects a 100-foot buffer. We don't have very strong regulations to interpret how we put it. You heard me talking to Mary Pinto saying, here's how I think about 25, 50, 100.
Okay, and I understand that, but this proposal is, I'm a consultant. This proposal says we'll go review lots of regulatory documents and other terms and see if you like them. And that's not a scope of what you want. Do you want a lengthy regulatory document like DEP's interpretation of the act? Or are there very specific things that you feel you need regulatory guidance on versus the whole world? Because I looked at Bellingham, and Bellingham's, it's fine, but I don't know that's what you're asking for.
I don't know what I don't know.
Okay, well, go look at Bellingham, somebody.
Oh, I've looked at Bellingham, but I don't know how effective it would be versus what we have now. I do know that we've always had trouble. Historically, we haven't done enforcement orders except in the last 2 years. So to clarify our enforcement orders and you can guide us in that, it would be helpful if we had regulations that spelled out what we felt should be happening in 100-foot buffer zones.
That's one regulation. What's the next one?
So the buffer zones, I think, need some different types of regulations on what can occur in 25 no disturb and 50-foot no build. We have the opportunity in the bylaw to waive as needed. So do we want some sort of formal waiver process with the application and that sort of thing? Do we want a mitigation strategy? So say you have 10 feet of a building, can you do 2-to-1 ratio enhancement and mitigation in another way? We detect vernal. No, we don't. We have a no build in the 50-foot, and that's all you got, unless you want to build regulations that say different things.
And remember, a couple of weeks ago, we explicitly passed a vote saying we're allowed to do something within 25 feet, even though we don't let you.
Right.
At no point did we say, and we want you to do something else someplace
But we
else.
could.
Well,
Yeah.
this is where I'm saying.
It'd be
I
a lot
don't know, I
easier
don't
if it
know.
was in the bylaw somehow.
And so then,
So-
we also regulate vernal pools, which are not protected under the state act. We also protect isolated land subject to flooding. We protect bordering land subject to flooding, but it's unclear if we protect zone A and zone X or just zone A. So those things need clear definitions and performance standards. You know, how do we want our RDAs and NOIs filed, and those sorts of things can also be something we don't do here. Some towns vote explicitly on the Wetland Protection Act and explicitly on the bylaw. Typically, when we're approving something, we're approving it. We haven't ever denied one part. But if we, for example, for Benny's, if we were gonna deny the barn or garage, we would be denying under the bylaw specifically, not the act. So those sorts of things don't have regulations. There are different towns besides Bellingham. I think Sturbridge and Shrewsbury have different types of regulations.
I just, my reaction to the proposal was, we're gonna look at a bunch of other things and see if you like them. Yes,
Thank you for your
I am
expertise.
candid sometimes.
Having done this.
Well, I think we can, are you suggesting we do it internally more so
No,
than?
I think you need to, if I was going to assist you, I would want to know what you want assistance in. And if you have a list of, which you just went through a whole bunch, these are the areas we feel we need regulatory policy. That's a different way to approach, rather than I'm gonna go look at all the different regulations and local commissions in your region, and you tell me what you like.
And pick carte blanche what
You
you
tell me
want.
what you like. I'd rather have a consultant respond to me saying, I need regulatory policy in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Give me proposals on what those regulations should say.
President Local asking on a BSC.
I don't think we've defined exactly. So do you want me to write up a list of what I think should go in the regs to review at the next meeting and then get the proposal revised?
I think that would be helpful.
That makes sense.
I don't know about anybody else.
Yes, and then to confirm with them, these are the sort of things that we wanted to do. Is that covered in your 11.8?
Yeah, I mean, to spend $4,000 going around reading local ordinances, I can do that on a weekend.
Right.
Here's another anecdotal story about my not knowing what I don't know. Peter will remember, we've gone on sidewalks for some of the large projects. And I have watched Mike and Peter get into conversations with people from Goddard or people from other agencies. And they know our Minden bylaw and better than we do. And if we have the ability to start saying, no, even I get the feeling that large companies are getting away with stuff because our regulations don't spell out that they can't do it.
You're dealing with legislative language versus operational language.
Right, the biggest one I remember is a wetland that's upstream of something doesn't count. And I'm going, what? It's a wetland. No, it doesn't count. Things like whether.
That's an act.
Right, okay, well, then there might be similar kinds of things that we have conversations with that would be specific for the bylaw.
The nice thing about the regulatory process versus the bylaws is you start out with 10 regulations that you feel you need. You're still the amendment and adopting authority. And if you want to add, or you say this isn't working, you can change it. It's a very flexible process.
After a public hearing, yes.
Yes, after a public hearing.
I also think,
That's for town bylaws.
we can build out our stormwater regs, so we've had some instances where they say, we're doing low impact development, and this board kind of doesn't think they're doing enough. And if we have it lined out, we can reference exactly where we are seeing or not seeing.
Yeah.
Or regulating the 100-year flood instead of.
25.
So I don't think we need a motion, but I would say that we do two things. We wait for Isabella to come up at our next meeting with a write-up and also to reach out to this other company and see if they will be more responsive if we give them something in another couple of weeks. Give them an updated RFP.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's unfair to the consultant.
This really isn't a shame, no.
The bylaw review.
No, regulations, I don't think.
He's a wetland scientist.
It's a different skill set. He
I
goes,
mean, in theory, he could, but he is slowing down his company and.
Okay. So it's more of a want to need, and he doesn't want to need to. Any other
I guess if anyone
comments?
has regulations or towns or things that they want.
I thought
To bring them
pretty
to the
comprehensive.
About beaches.
What do I know? Yeah.
How about a beach regulation?
Is Fenn, he wasn't able to do it? Brandon, what's his name?
I kind of reached out to firms with more staff. Brandon's also just a one business.
Well, it's more than one person, yeah, okay.
You reached out to SC if you.
I think,
we're just gonna wait.
I think in a way it's unfair to ask a consultant to send you something like this. Because the consultant is basically saying, I'll look around, here's some stuff I'm gonna give you, tell me what you want. Rather than, tell me what you want, and I will go find a way to write it.
Yeah, that seems like the better. Tell them what you want, and then let them try to process.
I hadn't gotten much feedback, so what I asked of all the consultants in the same way was like a kickoff meeting.
Oh, no,
With
that's.
two follow-ups and defining that more so than what we needed in the regulations, but yeah.
They'll spend your money all day long, you can let them.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, so, complaint process discussion, we going anywhere with that?
I sent out information last week or 2 weeks ago, so I don't know if anyone had more they want to say on the topic.
Did anybody have a chance to review the information?
Maybe some. They're probably been buried.
Oh, I did.
You're pretty tired.
Who's that gold star?
Comes with age.
All right, updates, Chair?
That's you.
I got nothing. Agent?
Still working on 23 Cape Road with the restoration and the stormwater outfall. We've had some meetings. I'm expecting to potentially schedule a site visit for the commission soon, a month maybe. think that's about it.
Is that the
Grant,
big sticky
what's
point
about
there?
grant?
Have they been digging up, they've been cleaning out the wood? Has that all been done, or is that?
There,
100K.
we have a little bit more left to dig out and then some stabilization.
Nice and dry, couldn't ask for better weather.
Yeah, we got the, I don't know, there will be kickoff meeting and some other stuff in the future, but we did get the grant from Maple Farm, so that's exciting. I know Mark Mnuchin, who owns Quistit Farm, he's come in a couple of times, wants to make sure he's able to bid on the construction of the trail work, so it'll be some site maintenance for the trail design. We do have rough kind of GIS locations for where the trail will go. There's definitely gonna have to be some property owner discussions, some easements behind Brickby Lane and on Shirley Jean Smith, which we've got approval for through town meeting, so getting those drafted. And then discussions with groups who may want the Bay State Trail Riders or Boy Scout groups who may need projects, building boardwalks and permitting those boardwalks will be fun, so.
Nice job on that.
Lake Nipmuc Task Force, the association, Lake Nipmuc Association is closed for the season, so they will open up in April and start this all over again. Land Use Committee?
Meeting next week.
You will approve minutes for September 11, 2025. And we want to go one at a time.
I only have the September 11th, so I revised the motion that Leah and Susan made.
Yeah.
I will move them.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The abstentions? Motion passed unanimously. Good and welfare of the commission.
I just have one little comment. So I'm scheduled to get my second, partial knee replacement, in the end of the month, so I'm probably gonna have to remove it for the first meeting in November. Rather than that, I'm fine. I'm going to take the big knee.
Good luck with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Fully bound.
Don't go through metal detectors.
We were told by Isabella today that the reason we didn't all get wet the other day was because he asked.
I said, I'm not going out in this weather, will you please do it? You pick the one day in the entire month and it's raining.
Oh, man, you're gonna be tough.
Right?
Items not reasonably anticipated, what 48 items in advance of the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Any seconds? All those in favor?
Let's get out of here.
Motion passes
Yeah,
unanimously.
my dinner.
No, Mike. Probably here at night, you're
I'd like to be, or at least be a late liaison.
Okay, I think, oh, good job. Yeah. EPRC for the agriculture commission bylaw and saying, when you guys ever do this, which is important. I don't know, I just didn't know if you were on this or not, so I'll follow up.